If your job at a healthcare facility includes disinfecting against viruses, you know prevention is the best medicine, and maintaining healthy spaces starts with a healthy cleaning routine. Grainger's world-class supply chain helps ensure you have the quality products you need when you need them, from disinfectants and cleaning supplies to personal protective equipment, so you can help deliver a clean bill of health. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Good morning from the low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Seats with myself, Greg H. Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family of Podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. As joining me in segment number 2, one of our favorites, Rob Donaldson. He does a great job with the Rob's Best Bets show, which is over on his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. Handicaps a little bit of everything: college football, the NFL, baseball, college basketball. We're going to get his thoughts on just what he's been taking a look at here in the early part of the season, some of the teams that he's a little bit more stock up / stock down on. Something that you've noticed with my DK Network write-up picks is that I have went ice cold, and I know that Rob told me off air a little bit that he had been having a little bit of a rough streak as well. So we're actually going to share our thoughts as to how we try to overcome some of these cold streaks, because it happens to every single one of us as bettors, and I do think that that's some of the most important content that you get, because it's always nice to be able to get picks and analysis, but as we know, the human side of betting is that sometimes this can be a very, very cruel sport. We're going to be just airing that out with our good friend Rob and how he overcomes it, how he tries to stay even keel, and then we're going to be taking a look at some of these games for Sunday, and then in the final segment, going to get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, but we did have a fun day of college basketball on Saturday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Well, the write-up streak has been very, very rough for me. Start out 10-2, and then you go 1-8 in your last 9, and it happens to the best of us. It's me needing to pull my head out of my rear, as I like to put it, in a PG way. But we had St. Thomas at laying a very nice number. I was actually able to write it up when it was 2.5 somehow, some way at DraftKings. That was a very, very good number, because it gets steamed up to 4.5. You get closing line value, and it comes nowhere even close. That just sometimes happens when it comes to gauging college basketball's UW Green Bay wins by a count of 64-51, and for St. Thomas, miserable day shooting for them. They go 19 of 60 from the floor, 5 of 22 from three-point range. They win the turnover battle. They grab more offensive rebounds than UW Green Bay, but UW Green Bay on this day went 19 of 24 at the free throw line, shot about 43.5% from the floor, and that just sometimes happens. You also saw Northern Kentucky not be able to get the covers. Long Island back-to-back covers. They lose to Northern Kentucky by a count of 72-64, but they were catching double figures, so that was a quality cover for them. Another quality cover involving a pretty sizable underdog, Jackson State. They close as about an 11.5-point underdog. They hang in there against a Georgetown team, which has been all over the place for them. 88-81, the final is Georgetown. They get bailed out by Jaden Epps going completely inferno mode. 7 of 9 from three-point range, 34 points, 4 assists, and for Georgetown, they actually did a nice job taking care of the ball. They only turned it over 9 times in this one, but for Jackson State, they held in there because they won the rebound battle 43-33, which, full disclosure, I was not expecting, but Zeke Cook was able to have a double-double, and Ted Evans Jr., he logs 20 points in this one. Just imagine if Deshaun Ruffin, former top 75 recruit, was actually healthy for Jackson State, went out with an injury prior to the start of the season. So, I mean, that's a team that might be quite dangerous out there in the SWAC, and Missouri, they're not looking like they're going to be too dangerous in the SEC. They get the win against Loyola Maryland, but they come nowhere close to covering the 20.5-point spread. 78-70 is your final. As for Missouri, that's the third straight game in which they were laying north of 15 points, and the third straight time they were unable to cover as they do go 11 of 28 from three-point range, but for Loyola of Maryland, they won the rebound battle 41-34, and for Missouri, they did a better job in this game being able to generate turnovers as they were able to get 18 in total. A team that was able to generate a whole lot of something, Liberty. They just mopped the floor with Maryland Eastern Shore. Maryland Eastern Shore was catching 24.5, and it was nowhere near enough. 99-62 the final for Liberty. 15 of 31 from three on 7 turnovers. You didn't have anyone break really north of 20 points. Keaton Menefee was able to put in there the 20, but just an absolute masterclass from Liberty. They get credit where credit is due, and it's looking like we're getting a dark horse out there in the Metro Atlantic. How about Canisius taking down Western Kentucky 85-77? Western Kentucky a bit cool from three, going 2 of 10 from distance, but you had 17 points, 16 rebounds out of Frank Mitchell. Guy that came up from the non-D1 ranks, has been doing a tremendous job for Canisius. And Canisius has done a really good job of scouring the junior college market, being able to bring in some of these non-D1 guys, be able to help them fit in, and they have really been able to pay off in droves thus far. And for Canisius, they go 9 of 23 from three-point range, so very impressive showing there. Also a very impressive showing from UNC Greensboro. They've already got a win over Arkansas on their ledger. They win this one by a count of 88-77 over Delaware as they go 11 of 27 from three. Delaware came into this game undefeated, by the way. I don't know if they're necessarily that great, and Greensboro did lose a rebound battle 40-30, but for Greensboro, how about what you've been able to get out of Mikael Brown-Jones? Entered in the day shooting 57% from three. He goes out for 18 points, 8 boards. He goes 1 of 1 from three to be able to bolster that even further. And Keyshawn and Kobe Langley, the Langley brothers, they both put in there 16 points. Of course, I write up Belmont on Friday. They don't do the job, and then as an underdog against Penn on Saturday, they win in overtime, 84-79. Sometimes it just goes that way, but for Belmont, you had Malik Dia coming off the bench, 27 points, 8 rebounds, much better showing from Belmont, who's been a little bit lackadaisical to begin the season. For Penn, they're looking to turn the page from the Jordan Dingle era, and they were able to get some good production out of Nick Spinoso with 21 points, 8+ rebounds. Tyler Perkins was able to log about 25 points in this one as well. And for Penn, just 8 turnovers in an overtime game, but Belmont was able to win the battle on the glass, something that had been eluding them all season long, and Penn also went 12 of 20 at the free throw line. Something you do want to be gauging a lot in college basketball right now is that free throw shooting. This was a little bit unexpected. Cal has been having a little bit of a rough go of it thus far this season, but they forced San Diego State to overtime. Ultimately, Cal does fall by a count of 76-67, but a sloppy Joe's game in this one in which Cal really did a solid job of being able to get second chances. They won the offensive rebound battle 21-7 and the overall rebound battle by a count of 52-38. Fardaws Amick, 14 points, 18 rebounds. The problem for Cal is that they went 9 of 38 from three-point range, and they're doing this without Jalen Celestine. They're doing this without Devin Askew, so you got to give some credit where credit is due. And for San Diego State, feels like they've been playing much more up-tempo, and it's just not really resulting in the world's greatest results. I recognize that they're 5-1, but they were in a dogfight here against Cal. You saw Jaden Latte be able to put in their 19 points. He actually entered into Saturday, leading off college basketball in terms of total scoring. And for the credit of San Diego State, only 5 turnovers in this game, but they win this game because they went 31 of 37 at the free throw line, and Cal went 12 of 18 at the free throw line. So that was of a little bit of intrigue. Also of intrigue, Bowling Green. Nice money line winner over Lipscomb, 82-61. No idea why. Bowling Green was about a 3.5 point underdog, but Marcus Hill, 33 big points. They were able to completely dominate that one. This was a nice battle of mid-majors as well. Bradley, they take down Vermont by a count of 79-70, and Bradley's always lauded for their defense, but this offense looks pretty solid as well. Connor Hickman, he had 14 points. Bradley does need to cut down on the turnovers. Entered in this game with about 14 per contest, but they did a solid job in this one. Just 8 turnovers, and for Vermont, they're always very efficient with the ball. Matt Verrado, 6 of 10 from three-point range. He's able to chip in there 23 points. Team goes 11 of 29 from three-point range, but ultimately, Bradley's able to get the win, and they also get the cover. Right now, it's a debate over who's the worst team in the great state of Illinois, and right now, it's not Northern Illinois, and it might be DePaul. DePaul falls at home to Northern Illinois, 89-79. And don't look now, but Northern Illinois is now 5-1, and DePaul is 1-5. As for DePaul, you did have Deshaun Nelson put in their 23 points, but George Mikan is right now rolling over in his grave as Northern Illinois lights it up from 3, going 11-22 from 3, and David Coit, 34 points, 8 of 15 from 3-point range. So that was rather startling. What you saw in the Emerald Coast Classic was quite startling as well. Santa Clara with 2 wins on the Pac-12 roster on their ledger. They've already taken down Stanford. They've already taken down Oregon. Well, they didn't have any gas left in the tank to be able to take down Ohio State. Ohio State, 86-56. They firmly took control of this one. He did have Santa Clara win the rebound battle by kind of 37-35, but that's about all that they won. As for Santa Clara, they lose a turnover battle, 15-7 for Ohio State. Jameson battle, well, he battled to go 5 of 10 from 3 as a team as a collective, 13 of 28 from distance. In Santa Clara, also went 8 of 16 from the free throw line, 6 of 20 from 3-point range. Clearly was not their day, but it was the day for the Alabama Crimson Tide, playing against an Oregon team that's still without N'Faly Dante. Nate Biddle just feels like Oregon can't stop avoiding injuries. This was one where it depended upon where you bet it, as the closing number in a lot of spots was more in the neighborhood of about an 8.5-ish. This opened up more around 7.5, so bet timing always important with this, but Alabama, they get it done by kind of 99-91. As for Alabama, they actually didn't take a ton of threes in this one. They go 9 of 24 from distance. Just really efficient offensive play with Mark Sears chipping in there, 27 points, 7 boards for Alabama. They win the rebound battle 40-28. And for Oregon, you did have Jermaine Cuisar chip in there, 24 points, but for Oregon, they went just 7 of 20 from 3-point range. They could have really used someone like, Nate Biddle, N'Faly Dante to be able to help out on that front. It was just not there, but something that was there was a win for Southern Miss. 90-84 the final. It's very clear what you need to do to take down Milwaukee. You have to force guys not named BJ Freeman to be able to beat you. And Freeman, he only had 14 points as he entered into this one, averaging more like 20.5 points per contest. And for Southern Miss, it also helped that they went 12 of 23 from 3-point range with Donovan Ivory, who began his career at Green Bay, putting in their 32 big points, and Austin Crawley was able to give you 25 as well. And we saw Princeton get another win and cover. They're 6-0 straight up. They're 6-0 against the spread, 80-66 the final against Northeastern. Now, a little bit tight on the spread. They were laying about 12.5 or so, but you know what? A cover is a cover. If you're laying 12.5, it's the same as if you win by 13, as if you win by 1,300. You don't get bonus points for the absolute blowouts. As for Northeastern, they were able to shoot 50% from the floor, but Princeton, they go 15 of 16 at the free throw line. And how about Xavion Lee being the man to step up in this one? 30 points, 6 boards, 4 assists, and he, Mataloco. You can even see guys like a Blake Peters, who was really a designated sharpshooter for the team a season ago, Caden Pierce. Any of these guys on any given night can really be that go-to guy. Today it was Lee, and for Princeton, a very nice win, a very nice cover, and that's another game that went over the total, and we saw a lot of overs happen on Saturday, as overall, overs are back to hitting at about a 52.5% clip thus far this season in college basketball. 494 overs, 448 unders. I believe that we're up to 9 pushes along the way as well. And favorites, they continue to do quite well, hitting at a 51.6% clip, 482, 453, and 16 against the spread. Meanwhile, home underdogs, just 104, 114, and 6 against the spread. I do think that is going to be rising up a little bit more, and this is with the Y game pending, but we saw on Saturday 37 overs, 22 unders, and I think that there might be a result or two that is still pending, but it was a big day for overs, and if you look at the last 7 days in college basketball, overs are hitting at about 54.2%. 185 overs, 165 unders along the way. I believe we've had 4 pushes. Might be a little bit mistaken there, but favorites, they've died down a little bit more in this time span as well, going 179, 175, and 8 against the spread. So that's what we saw in college basketball on Saturday, and that's what we're getting trend-wise. Coming up next, we're going to be talking with our good friend Rob Donaldson. Me and him have been having a little bit of cold handicapping. We're going to be talking about how we do our best to be able to get through it. We're going to be talking about just gauging this time of year. Are we getting more of a sense of these teams? Do we need a little bit more data? We're going to dive in on the Sunday games. We're also going to be taking a look at these coaches and why we shouldn't be writing them off after one bad year, and some of the teams that are ascending with a second or third year coach, and going to take a look at some games for Sunday. That's up next right here on Cuts and Good Seats with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VSiN Family Podcast.
Sports Betting Innovative Analytics has taken the guesswork and emotion out of sports betting to bring you an innovative and trustworthy resource to enhance your journey to becoming a winning player. With industry-leading money-back guarantee options backed by their sophisticated modeling, they want to introduce you to a system that's not widely seen or available to help you beat the bookmaker. Specializing in NBA, college basketball, and WNBA, your first week is always free. Get started at SBIA1.com today.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts, and it is always great to be joined by this man, Rob Donaldson. He does a great job taking a look at this wonderful game of college basketball. On top of that, I know that he does an amazing job in terms of the football front. He does great work with regards to baseball when that's in season as well. Just an absolute wealth of knowledge. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at RobDFB, to be able to catch his show, the Rob's Best Bet Show, you go to youtube.com/his first and last name, Rob Donaldson, all together. And Rob, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. And college basketball, it can be brutal and it can be amazing. And right now I'm experiencing a lot of that, brutality and anguish, but I know the tide's going to turn, and these games are still fun to watch regardless.
Oh, do not worry. I am in the exact same boat. So misery does have a little bit of company on that one. And I mean, we're both going through it a little bit. What's the biggest thing for you when you are going through a little bit of a cold spell? Because I do think that one of the most important things is to just, for lack of a better term, keep calm, and just, if you have a track record of success, continue to do that. Now, if you don't have a track record of success, then maybe it's time to change a little bit of something around. That's a little bit of a different discussion. But that said, I do think that so much of sports betting is not just putting in the evaluations. It's not just trying to get good numbers, but it's just trying to stay even keel and not like jacking up your bet size when things are going good and not chasing when things are going absolutely awful.
Absolutely. You got to stay the course. And especially like you said, when you do have a track record that works and it's worked for years, you kind of have to just trust your process, and eventually it's going to get there. Sometimes you're going to have a stretch where you hit a lot of bad beats, and you just got to look at that like, hey, I picked the right side. Those will start to turn your way eventually. And vice versa. There are some games where it's an absolutely bad read, and you got to kind of reverse engineer the line and kind of look into, what was so off about this pick. And I've had to do that a few times, and I really do think right now it's just kind of a learning process within the season, but it's also a time where you don't really want to overreact because there's a lot of moving pieces. There's not a lot of continuity right now within each team, and I think that's going to really play out as the season goes on here.
Yep, I do think that is so important to do, and it's just so important in life in general, whether that be sports betting, whether that be in your personal life. Hey, maybe you're working a 9-to-5 job, to never get too high, never get too low, never be like it's the greatest thing ever, never be like it's the worst thing ever, and just try to continue to plug along. I think that is such good advice, Rob, and certainly that's something that both of us are looking to do moving forward. And Rob, I know you're a man out there in the great state of Iowa, so how about the first game that we take a look at is that game that's going to be going down in the ESPN Invitational, because unfortunately we don't have the Hawkeyes in action, but we do have Iowa State and Texas A&M, and I do think that this is one of the most interesting games of the day. Right now, it's a darn near a pick-em in most spots. I'm seeing one or two books posting up Texas A&M as a 1-point favorite with a total between 137 and 138.5, and though the defenses are a little bit different, we both know that these are two teams that they really pride themselves on defense. And I do think that the line is relatively right here, though I do give a slight lean to Iowa State.
Yeah, it's an interesting spot because what we've kind of seen from Texas A&M from sportsbook perspective is they've been kind of laying lines that are really shallow all season long, whether it's against Ohio State. It was sort of a tight, almost pick-em-ish line. Against SMU, it was only about 5 or 6. And then this game right here that we're seeing with Iowa State, where the number 12 team in the entire country is going up against Iowa State and they're the underdog, it almost is kind of telling, where you have to kind of believe that the books at least know something and they have a reasoning behind why they're setting these lines for Texas A&M where they are. What we've seen from Iowa State so far is that a lot of their production offensively has come from a lot of their freshmen. So you can look at that a couple different ways. You can see, hey, they're just going to get better as the season goes on. Or you can say, maybe it's just a flash in the pan. I think overall, I like this game to go under, but it's just going to be a fun game to watch from a viewership perspective and a learning perspective.
Yep, I do agree with you there. The initial lean that I had was to the under, and I think that Iowa State, just because their defense does such a good job of being able to generate those turnovers, it gives me a slight lean there, but I am in total agreement with what you were breaking down there, as we do have a really good slate of action that is going to be going down in Florida on Sunday. As joining me on the show, we do have Rob Donaldson, who does tremendous work with his show, the Rob's Best Bet show, right here on the Greg Peterson Experience on Visa, the Sports Betting Network. And how about if we take a look at this interesting game? Because Florida Atlantic, they were the darlings of last season, and now they find themselves as about 2.5 to 3 point favorites against Virginia Tech, with a total between 151.5 and 152. And I do think that this is such an interesting circumstance here, just because you do have a Florida Atlantic team that we've already seen the worst of it for them when they had that just brutal game against Bryant. They were unable to hit the broadside of a barn. Now things are going very well for them the last two games, and I'm not sure how you view this game, but at 151 after 152, with a pair of teams that are outside the top 240 in terms of total possessions per game, even if both teams are knocking down a lot of shots, I think that there's a good likelihood that we get an under here.
Yeah, I definitely lean towards the under, just because, both of these teams kind of exploded offensively the last couple, but Florida Atlantic really does want to kind of slow down the tempo, and we saw that in the tournament, that they're really comfortable playing in that sort of space, and they can also ramp it up at times as well, but VT to stay in this game is going to do that exact thing. And what we've seen from Mike Young over time, and this really is a prove-it year for Mike Young, because over the last couple of years of Virginia Tech, he hasn't been producing the results that this program would like. And, we've seen him at Wofford. We know that he can build a program. This is, I believe, year 3 or year 4 for him. I believe year 4, if I'm not mistaken. And that's really a prove-it year. That's a time where you have to really have a team that's ready to go and at least be a tournament-eligible team. And I really do think I'm a believer in this Virginia Tech team from what we've been seeing early on. And I like taking that side here if we're talking about the +2.5 as well.
Yep, I'm seeing a +3, and I set Florida Atlantic as the slightest of slight favorites at home, but pretty much anything north of a 2, I'm with you on Virginia Tech. I don't necessarily want them outright on the money line, because I do think that ultimately this could be one of those classic 1, maybe 2 possession games, but I'm in agreement with you as well. I do think that with Virginia Tech as well, Lynn Kidd has really been a guy that has been able to rise up, and Virginia Tech is one of those teams that I'm much more bullish on than I was to begin the season, because I did think that they would miss Justin Mutz a little bit more, bringing in Kidd and having him just be so productive after a season ago. He was pretty much glued to the bench. That's something that I've been taking note of, and we're a few teams in general that you might be feeling a little bit more stock up on than you were at the beginning part of the season.
Yeah, Virginia Tech is definitely in that mix. And then Oklahoma, what we've kind of seen from them in the early tournament action, whether it was pummeling Iowa, and I watched that game pretty closely as a fan, and then the next game, they go out and they stuck with USC and their athletes throughout the entire game, and then even during stretches looked like they controlled it. What's really interesting about Oklahoma is that they have the athletes right now, and when you think back to those Loyola Chicago teams that Porter Moser was coaching, they kind of had a grinded out physical style to them. And this Oklahoma team feels like an embodiment to a degree of those sorts of teams, but just way more athletic. And that kind of makes them feel dangerous to me. So a couple teams there, Virginia Tech and Oklahoma, definitely strike me. Even Iowa State, a team we've already talked about, strikes me as a team that have raised their stock quite a bit, because this matchup against Texas A&M, if this was the Iowa State team that we saw 2 years ago or even last year at times, we're not talking about a pick'em. We're talking about them being 5, 6, 7 point underdogs.
Yes, absolutely. And I do think that it's going to be so interesting to gauge these teams as well moving forward, because there are teams that I feel like we can feel a little bit more bullish / bearish on with the sample size that we've got. As Rob Donaldson, he does tremendous work over at his YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson, joining me on the Greg Peterson Experience on Visa, the Sports Betting Network. But how much do you want to see perhaps a little bit more of a sample size before you really make determinations about a team? Because we are still in a circumstance where with a lot of these teams, they played about 5 or so games. There might be a few teams that have played 6 or 7 games. We still have a team like Dartmouth, who I think has played like 3 games. thus far. So you've got some outliers there, but how much of this is still a little bit of an evolution and a work in progress for a lot of these teams that you're evaluating?
We're in an interesting spot right now in the college basketball season because a lot of these teams have only played, 4, 5, 6, maybe even 7 games. And we kind of have to make a determination right now in the early goings of how we think these teams can perform against other teams that we like and other teams just in general. Because, for example, like in Oklahoma, they might be catching a lot of value right now because they're not kind of overly seen as a team that was going to compete in the Big 12. But now if we're kind of making the determination that, hey, this team is a lot better, I think you need to hop on these teams early before their, value is gone and you're not catching those points of value or the possessions of value that you would in 2 or 3 weeks. So it's an interesting spot where you kind of have to make your determination right now in terms of the betting value, because once you do figure out these teams, the sports books have figured out these teams along with you, everything is going to be a lot more sharp. So definitely an interesting spot, but I am kind of a believer in just reacting a little bit to these early seasons just in the right spots or with the right teams based on your own personal valuation.
Yep, I do think that is important to do as well. And another one of those teams I'm looking at and evaluating that I'm just fully convinced this is not the same team as it was a season ago, that'd be Butler. They're another team that's going to be out there at the ESPN Events Invitational, and they're finding themselves between a pick'em to about a 1.5 point underdog. Total is about 147, and clearly this Butler offense is much better than it was a season ago. Last few games has been a little bit of rough sledding for the defense, but this Butler team brought in a lot of transfers. You can tell that Thad Matta pretty much just scrapped what he did a season ago, went with a different approach, and I like Butler not just in this game, but I do think that they're going to be able to cover some spreads in the Big East. Certainly they're not on the level of like your Creightons, Marquettes, UConns, what have you. There's no way they really can be, and I think that they're probably still going to miss the NCAA tournament as of right now. But that said, I do think that Butler can be one of those sneaky teams that in Big East play when they're catching a lot of points can cover numbers, and I think against a team like Boise State on a neutral court, they can win this game.
I'm 100% with you, and I think they're actually a threat to make the tournament as well because they got Hinkle Fieldhouse at their back. So if they're halfway decent, they're going to have a real home court environment to kind of go along with their talent. And I think that Michigan State loss when they went on the road to East Lansing was kind of a reset of their value because they were absolutely smoking teams in the first 3 or 4 games. And when they played Michigan State, they lost by 20. It was nationally televised, I believe, on a Friday. And it was really the only game that was highlighted on that slate. It felt like a lot of people were riding Butler. That kind of felt like a reset of their value. And then they go out next game on a neutral court and they go toe to toe with Florida Atlantic. Really thought they had the lead late in that game in the second half. And it was just kind of a game of runs where eventually it didn't swing their way. But then again, Penn State, this was a comeback type game that they really showed some grit. They showed some offense, like you mentioned. And Thad Matta is a great coach. I'm a big time believer in Butler. And I'm with you. I'm going to be betting Butler against Boise State, and I think they can make this a convincing win.
Yep, I do think that they can as well. I like what I've seen out of Thad Matta, and he's just a good coach in general that you can tell in season number 1, it just wasn't necessarily his team in general. And how much do you want to take a look at a coach perhaps in like season number 2, season number 3, getting in many more of their guys? Because I feel like we do write off these coaches a little bit too soon because it used to be in pretty much all sports, not just college basketball, but you see it in football a lot as well. We want to just exile these guys after one bad year, where I do think that it takes a little bit more time for these guys to be able to get things online, because not everyone can be TJ Alzenberger, who takes a team from 2 wins and brings them to the Sweet 16 the next year.
This is going full circle, but again, you look at Virginia Tech and Mike Young. We saw what he did at Wofford for decades, and the results in the early goings at Virginia Tech weren't the greatest. And a lot of people were thinking that this was a prove-it year. Well, he might be proving it and might be showing that, he is still a great coach. And then similarly, we got to let these teams develop, like a St. John's. Everybody wants to hop on the board with St. John's right out the gate because it's Slick Rick. He's awesome. He's got a cool demeanor. He brought in a lot of transfers to a notable university. But you got to give it time because these teams are going to get better when they have a lot of inexperience playing with each other. They have a great coach at their back. They're really not going to get a lot worse. So I think the coaches definitely matter. And, in prove-it years, we saw it last year with like a Jeff Capel at Pittsburgh. They want to step up, and the players really feel a need or a respect to step up as well.
Yep, I do think that it is going to be interesting to gauge some of these teams moving forward in that vein, and I do think that we are seeing a lot of teams that maybe they were just left for dead after one bad year a season ago, be able to rise up, and one of those teams has been Monmouth, as Monmouth is traditionally a really good program. I was a little bit surprised by the performance that they put on against Belmont a few days ago. I'm going to call it what it is, but other than last year, King Rice has been able to do a solid job at Monmouth. Now they play against Penn, and right now the opening number is Penn, laying 6.5. How do you feel about a team like a Monmouth, where typically they're a relatively solid team, had a disastrous year last year, and now they're on the come up once again?
Yeah, Monmouth is really interesting because, we kind of talked about Butler and how Michigan State felt like a reset for their value. Well, that loss to Princeton coming on the heels of a win at West Virginia. They lost to Princeton by, I think it was 30 or 27 or something like that. But they got absolutely smoked. And then the next game they go out and they play really well. And now you talk about, them being Belmont, and now they're going up against Penn. I think that this is a good spot for Monmouth, and I do like Penn as well, but I think that Villanova that win is clouding a lot of their value right now, because I don't know if they're that good, but they did play up in a big spot, and you got to tip your hat. But I do think Monmouth is just the better team on a neutral floor, that is.
Yep, I do think that with Monmouth, they're going to have probably a little bit of a tough time with Penn. And I do think that Monmouth is doing for a little bit of regression with their three-point shooting. Going into this event, they were shooting 42% from three-point range. But I certainly do think that this is a team that is ascending, and they're going to be a team that I'm going to be watching for sure. Just not just in this game, but moving forward as well. And then, Rob, we do have ourselves a pretty nice Sunday in college basketball. We're doing this as we've got some TBD matchups out there in the Bahamas. We don't have any numbers up on those games, so pretty much everything else is set. Anything else that you're taking a look at, whether it be a team or two that you're going to be looking to bet on, or maybe it's just a game where you want to see a little bit more out of a team or two?
Yeah, what we've kind of noticed, and this happens during the winter breaks for students, and also during, Thanksgiving break, which is kind of ending tomorrow, but doubtful that a lot of these, bye games, for example, like Nebraska or Texas, are going to fill up. And what that does is it kind of sucks the atmosphere out of these certain spots that, teams really feed off of, especially these power teams going up against, maybe lower level competition. Well, I look at that Texas-Wyoming game, and I'm seeing Wyoming catching 16.5. They're also coming off a few days of rest, and they've looked really impressive in the early goings as well. They have wins over Charleston and Furman already, and they were pretty convincing wins at that. I think 16.5 is a lot, and I think this is a game that really could come down to the wire. So take the 16.5 confidently with Wyoming, I think, and maybe even sprinkle a little bit on the first half money line and a full game money line as well.
And what has been really interesting about Wyoming is the way that Sam Griffin has been a 20-point per game scorer. I don't think he's going to continue the 52% three-point shooting, and if he does, boy, you're really looking at something with Wyoming. But if they can cut down on the turnovers, because that's the one thing that I've noticed with Wyoming. They had that ghastly few games out there in the state of South Carolina where it felt like they did have a couple too many turnovers. That'd be big for them, and it does feel like Texas is trying to figure out who they are as well. So that is going to be a game of intrigue. And my friend, I know you're doing an absolutely amazing job taking a look at the game of college basketball over on your YouTube feed, youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. You do amazing work giving out your best bets, typically about 5+ times a week. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, Greg. Always love talking ball with you. It's always a highlight of my week when I get your text DM on Twitter. Just let me know, hey, does this time work? And I'm always like, yeah, of course it does. But if you want to follow me, you can do so at RobDFB, and that's going to be on X, or formerly Twitter. And then on YouTube, I post my videos and my picks quite often during the week. So you can do that by just searching my name, Rob Donaldson, and it should pop up. But as always, Greg, appreciate having me on, and let's try to win some bets more as the weeks go on here.
Yes, sir. How about if Sunday be the day of a turnaround, as it's a brand new week and things are all sunshiny. We have made it through Thanksgiving and our food comas, so perhaps that'll be able to get us online, as well as Rob. He does absolutely impeccable work on so many different fronts, whether that be college basketball, whether that be the NFL, college football, baseball. Every single time he joins this podcast, he's going to lend impeccable insight. So a big thanks to Rob for joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some big ones. And we're back back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuts Cussies with myself, Greg Gibbs Peterson, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. It's always great to get Rob Donaldson aboard. He does tremendous work over at his show/podcast, The Rob's Best Bet Show, which go to youtube.com/Rob Donaldson. You'll be able to get that 5+ times a week, doing an amazing job taking a look at this great game of college basketball. Does impeccable work when it comes to taking a look at the front of college football as well, the NFL. During baseball season, he tears it up there, and every single time he joins this podcast, lends amazing insight. So, big thanks to Rob for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at @GNet_D1, and we are going to be going in the Las Vegas rotation order. This is where we go with the games with 3 digits on the rotation first, and then the game with 6 digits. Those are going to be at the bottom, and with these conference tournaments, it's in all sorts of random order, though I will say that the ESPN events, that is going to be at the bottom, along with, I believe, the Bahamas events as well, but we've got the actual tournament games going to be at the bottom. The regular rotation games, those are going to be up top, so that does keep things a little bit easier. So let's get things started with 701, 702 on the betting board. It is Louisville, and they are going to be playing us in New Mexico State. New Mexico State is a underdog of 7.5 points, seeing a straight 8 out there as well. Open up at 6, totals anywhere between 143 and 145. I said New Mexico State as a 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take New Mexico State outright on the money line. Louisville had a pretty solid showing out there at Madison Square Garden a few days ago in those 2 games which they played against Texas. They held in there against Indiana. I think that was a little bit more of an indictment on those 2 teams rather than Louisville being good, though. This Louisville team is still out of sorts with regards to their offense. They have yet to really find that main trigger man, as we were thinking that the guy that would have the ball in his hands the most is Sky Clark, but actually your leader in assists right now is Taylor Johnson, so that's been a little bit of a surprise. You've got a Louisville team that shoots 29.5% from distance, and I do like what you're able to get down low out of Brandon Huntley at field. Not much of a score, but it's able to give you right around 10 boards per contest, but feels like they're just fish out of water when you're not getting a lot out of Trey White. That's been able to give you about 13.5 points per game, and this New Mexico State team has been able to look a little bit better ever since Femi Odekala has gotten into the fold. He was a top scorer at Pittsburgh a few seasons ago, and he's delivered 12+ points and 7+ rebounds in all 3 games that he's been out there on the floor. They did take a little bit of butt kicking against Southern Illinois in the last game that they played, but he's been able to shoot 40% from 3, and he should be able to elevate this team, as you've got someone in Jalen Jackson Posey who he's been having the ball in his hands a little bit more, shooting 46.5% from 3. It's a little bit more of a pure scorer, and he was turning the ball over right around 4 times per contest, so having Odekala out there, that helps him out, and that should be able to help out an offense that has been turning the ball over about 11.5 times per contest. Nothing great, nothing terrible. This team is not necessarily supreme down low, but Odekala helps out with the rebounding, and then you do have 6'7" Robert Carpenter, who he actually tore it up at Mississippi Valley State a few seasons ago and then dealt with injuries at Mississippi Valley State, which nobody succeeds there. He was able to have 16.5 points per game, shot it halfway decent from 3-point range, and then Jordan Rawls, now with having Odekala in the fold, he's able to take some of the load off of Jalen Jackson Posey, be a little bit more of a pass-first guy. That's giving you about 4.6 assists to 1.4 turnovers per game. I think that New Mexico State just going to be able to play a little bit more clean basketball. They're going to lose that battle down low, but I do like the backcourt, especially with having Jaden Harris being able to take the load off, comes in from the non-Division I level, and has been able to do a very good job of stuffing the stat sheet with right around 10 points, 4 boards per contest. So this is a spot where I don't trust in this Louisville team one bit. I think that the better coached team is New Mexico State. I'm taking them out right on the money line, and did set my total at a 143.5. We have seen Louisville be all over the place, and with New Mexico State under the tutelage of old Jason Hooten, I do think that they're going to be playing a little bit more of a slow brand of basketball. So diving in on the under, and going to be looking at New Mexico right on the money line. 703, 704 on the betting board. It is South Dakota, and they are going to be playing us Air Force. Air Force is a 1 to 1.5 point favorite, and your total on this game, it is between 132.5 and 134. And with South Dakota, I did set them as a favorite of 3 points, so I'm going to be looking at them outright on the money line. I'm just not sold on this Air Force team being able to do a solid job on the glass. Now, it's not to say that South Dakota is necessarily lighting the world on fire in terms of pulling in a bunch of boards or anything like that, but you bring in Lafayette. He comes over from Utah. He's been able to give the team right around 10 rebounds per game, and I don't think that there's a single player on Air Force that's able to match up with him. You've been able to get about 7.5 rebounds per game out of Kellen Boylan, about 7.5 points, 7.5 boards, and 6'7". He's been able to do an okay job of manning the glass, but you're looking at Bo Becker along with Evan Taylor to pretty much carry the team. They're at combined average of 36.5 points per contest. Both are giving you 5.7 rebounds per game. Taylor, a little bit more of a distributor at 3.5 assists per game, and he's been able to shoot 42% from three. Becker's a little bit more of the chucker, shooting about 38% from three-point range, but outside of these three guys, you really have no production whatsoever. I thought Corbin Green was going to be able to rise up. He has not been able to do anything whatsoever. Meanwhile, for South Dakota, you do have a few more options that are able to give you some scoring. Paul Bruns is able to give you about 8.5 to 9 points per contest. Isaac Bruns, I believe that is of relation. He's coming as a true freshman off the bench. He's supplying about 9 points per game for a South Dakota team that is shooting 39% from three. Now, while South Dakota shoots it well from three, they do turn the ball over a little bit too much, and here's a shocker. South Dakota not necessarily playing the world's greatest defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This team is typically in the bottom 50 in the country. Currently, they're at 246th, and this is without necessarily playing the world's greatest competition. Meanwhile, Air Force has actually been 71st, but again, Air Force played a lot of really bad competition to start the year. Air Force is a pretty slow and controlled team that is able to light it up from three. South Dakota is not going to go very up-tempo as well, but I do think that with South Dakota just having more scoring options, they are going to be able to get it done. And I did set my total at a 133, so we're sort of in the middle here. Personally, I'd rather have a 132.5 over rather than a 134 under, just because I do think that you've got the old situation of you might be getting some late game fouling to be able to push this total over, especially if it's a little bit nip and tuck towards the end of it, and both of these teams can go into flamethrower mode at any given time. So going to be taking a look at the over of 132.5 and looking at South Dakota right on the money line. 7-5, 7-6 on the betting board. It is Nebraska, and they play host to CS Fullerton. Fullerton is an underdog of between 16.5 to 17 points, and your total is between 141.5 and 142.5. With Fullerton, I did set them as an underdog of 13.5 points, so I am going to be willing to take these points with Fullerton. It's been a little bit of a rough go of it without Latrell. Wrightsell was their top scorer from a season ago. They do lose a few guys that were just so good on the defensive end for them as well. You do retain Vincent Lee, who was able to give you about 5.5 or so rebounds per contest, but Torrey San Antonio was a good on-ball defender that shot about 41% from three. He's out of the fold from a Fullerton team that last season shot 36.9% from distance. This year they're shooting just 26% from three, but I do think that they're going to be able to pick it up. You do have Max Jones, who's able to do a really nice job of being a go-to scorer. Comes in from D2 Tampa. He's been able to give you about 16 points, 4 boards, and Dominic Bruton, darn tootin', he's come over from Alcorn State to be able to give you 13 points per game. The team just doesn't necessarily have a lot of ideal size. Grayson Carper, he's been able to supply about 6 rebounds per game down low, so he's been able to provide a little bit of help, but it is a little bit of a thinner Fullerton team going up against a Nebraska bunch. They have gotten a nice shot in the arm with Jawan Gary coming back. Gary, he has been back for 3 games. He has given the team at least 12 points in every one of his contests a season ago prior to going down with injury. He's able to give the team 9.5 points, 6.5 boards, so I do think that things will taper off a little bit. 6'6" combo player that is able to pop 3 throughout his career. Shot below 30% from 3 right now. He's shooting north of 40% from the outside, but with Nebraska, they're playing much more slow and controlled than they did at the beginning of the Fred Hoiberg era. They're only turning the ball over 10 times per contest. They were trying to really, really push tempo. Now they're outside the top 200 in terms of total possessions per game, but you've got a trio in Kesai Shomanaga, Bryce Williams, Rink Mass, all give you between 14 and 15 points per game. And Mass, he's a 6'10" combo player that's able to give you 10 boards, along with right around 3 assists per game. I like what he's able to bring to the table. You've had Jerron Coleman be a solid scorer that's able to give you a few assists per game as well, but I do think that Fullerton is going to be able to hold in there. They're a team that really looks to slow things down, hold their head on defense. I think that they're going to be able to do a solid job in this ordeal. I will say Nebraska has gotten to 80-plus points in 4 of their last 5 games. If you look at the competition, though, they did a very solid job against Duquesne, but Oregon State, Florida A&M, Stony Brook, they've been playing some lesser competition. I do think that Fullerton is going to provide a little bit more of a defensive test, which is why I did set my total at a 139.5. I don't think you get enough possessions for an over, and I'm going to be willing to take the points with Fullerton. 7-7, 7-8 on the betting board. Eastern Michigan is going to be playing against North Dakota. North Dakota is a favorite of 3 points, and your total on this game is 145.5. This is from Conway, Arkansas, by the way, and it is a spot where I said Eastern Michigan as a 2-point favorite. I am going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. This North Dakota team has actually gotten off to a 4-1 start. They have been very lucky to pull out some of these games. They were able to blow out Elon, but they needed overtime to be able to take down New Orleans a day ago. You had to scrape out a 2-point win against a Pacific team I'm not necessarily feeling in. For North Dakota, I do think that we are going to see them have a little bit of a tough time in the backcourt. You've got Eli King, who comes over from Iowa State. He has been able to do a solid job of being very much a pass-first guy. Been doling out about 3.5 assists per contest. He chips in there about 5 or so rebounds per game, but he's not a guy that I necessarily think is equipped to be able to run this offense. You also don't have a lot of size down low. Other than PJ Oma, your leading scorer with about 18 points, 6.5 boards per contest, the only other guy giving you north of 5 rebounds per game, Amar Kulojovic. He has been able to come in and he's been able to do a solid job with about 7 rebounds per game at 6'8". But I do think that for Eastern Michigan, a team that their ultimate Achilles heel is on glass, them being able to hold relatively in there. They probably still lose the battle, but they don't get completely destroyed on glass. That's actually a good thing for them because they're going to have the best scorer in this game. That'd be Ty Acuff, who's been able to give you 21 points per game. The overall shooting percentage has been down. Typically, he's in the mid to high 30s from three-point range. He's been doing a little bit more by himself, so that's led to him shooting more around 30% from three-point range, but looks like he's going to be able to get a little bit more moving forward out of Yusuf Jihad. He has been able to give you about 9 points per game, shooting north of 40% from three-point range, and it does feel like Eastern Michigan starting to find a little bit more around Ty Acuff. John McGriff, he began his career over at Binghamton along St. John's. He's become a little bit more of a go-to scorer for the team, and with North Dakota, this team year in and year out, one of the lesser teams in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. And I do think that they're going to get carved up here, and for Eastern Michigan, they've all of a sudden gotten their act together on defense. This team all of a sudden has given up 72 points or fewer in 4 out of their last 5 games, so I do think that Eastern Michigan going to be able to hold up on the defensive side of things. I do think that this is going to be a high-scoring game. Both of these teams pretty allergic to defense, very inefficient on that side of things, and both teams somehow have 4 wins. I do like Eastern Michigan in this spot. I think that Ty Acuff is going to be the best player out there on the floor, so take a look at Eastern Michigan outright on the money line, and set my total 154, so looking at the over 709, 710 on the betting board. It is Colorado playing against Iona. Iona's an underdog of 16.5 points, and your total and is 145.5 to 146. I'm a little bit more out on this Iona team. It's clearly taking some time for all the pieces to come together. I do think that this is a little bit too big of a number, though. I did set my line at 15.5, so getting 16 plus. Going to be taking a look at the points. We did see Colorado have a slip up earlier this week against Florida State, and I do think that they're going to be able to recover from that as in regulation, because that game went to overtime. So I have to throw in there the disclaimer. In regulation, this team has given up 63 points or fewer in 4 out of their 5 games this year. They've done a great job in terms of their defense, with Eddie Lampkin being the main rebounder for this team. Not going to go out and be versatile and shoot threes, but he's able to give you about 8.5 boards per contest, and you got plenty of guys that are able to let it fly from 3. Someone like a Cody Williams, true freshman at 6'8". He's been shooting in the mid-30s from 3, chipping in there 11 points per game. You've got Tristan De Silva, KJ Simpson, pair of guys that had 16 points per contest a season ago. They're both shooting north of 40% from 3. Right now, what's killing Colorado, though, is the turnovers. North of 13 turnovers per game in Iona. It's done a nice job of pickpocketing thus far. They've been able to get 9.5 steals per game. This Iona team is also shooting 38% from 3-point range. I think we'll see a little bit of a fall off there. Isaac Tretaut, who comes over from Harvard, is able to give you about 17 points per game. And Joel Brown has been a nice pass-first guy. Comes in from Cal, isn't necessarily giving you a lot of scoring at about 6.5 points per game, but chips in there 4 assists, 2.5 steals per game, so love what he's able to do. And then Wiesa Ponzo, 6'7", is able to let it fly from 3. Now, what is hurting Iona is that their 7-footer Osborne Chema has yet to be able to take the floor this season. He's been dealing with injuries, so that's been a little bit miserable. And then the Southern transfer in Terrell Williams has just not really been effective at 6'6", 6'7", only giving you about 2.5 rebounds per game. But I do think that Iona is going to be able to hold up in this game. They're going to lose the battle on glass, but I do like the way that the backcourt has been functioning. You've got a very unselfish team that's able to pass up a good shot for a great shot. They are playing quite a bit more up-tempo as well, and I do think that Colorado is going to have a few struggles on the defensive side of things with the overall quickness that Iona does bring to the table. So it is a spot where at a 16.5, we've run a little bit too far. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Iona. I did set my total 147.5. I think that they're going to look to push the tempo a little bit more, even though Colorado obviously has some elevation involved with it. So I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be taking a look at Iona catching these points. 7-11, 7-12 on the betting board. Chattanooga is going to be playing us to Southeast Missouri State. Southeast Missouri State between a 12.5 to a 13-point underdog, and your total is between 149 and 150. Set my line at 12, so getting 13, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Southeast Missouri State. It is a Southeast Missouri State team that clearly is not the bunch that they had a season ago. Backcourt has really not been able to deliver a whole heck of a lot. You've had Josh Early come in after he spent some time over at Marshall, and he's been able to give you about 9 points per contest. Adam Larson at 6'9", he's able to do a very solid job of lighting it up from three-point range. He's been able to chip in there about 10 to 11 points per contest, shooting in the high 30s from three-point range, so have some upside there. The big key for this team, finding that main trigger man. They were able to get 4 assists yesterday out of Rob Martin, and he has really been that guy to sort of stir the drink, about 3.5, 4 assists per game, as a bit more of a pass-first guy, but they have been dealing with some injuries to Kobe Clark, who has been in and out of the fold. I'm thinking that he's going to be out once again, as he was unable to go for Southeast Missouri State yesterday, so that's been a little bit of an issue when he was out there on the floor last season, was able to give the team 8+ rebounds per game, but I do think that with their overall depth in the backcourt, it is going to be able to allow them to hold in there. You do have Aquan Smart, who I believe began his career at Maryland. He's been able to give this team about 8 to 9 points per contest, and then for Chattanooga, not like they've got amazing depth down low. Now, they do have someone in Sam Alexis who has been absolutely able to pile up the boards, 14 points, 12.5 rebounds per game. He has been able to do a great job taking that year 1 to year 2 bump in this program. And then you've got Hunter Ruff. He came over with Dan Earl from VMI, 16.5 points per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from 3, and he has been turning the ball over 14.5 times per game. That is a little bit of a concern for this team, but you've also been able to get 10 points, 7 boards out of Tyler Millen, who comes over from Middle Tennessee, where he was a part-time starter last 2 seasons. But with Chattanooga, they just always seem to be a team that doesn't play the world's greatest defense, and they had the highest three-point rate in all of college basketball. That's just merely the percentage of shots that you do take from three-point range in Southeast Missouri State. With them being down in the front court, that does mean that they are going to have a little bit more versatility along the perimeter to be able to defend those threes. They do have quite a bit of overall size and shiftiness, and I do think that that's going to throw Chattanooga off a little bit here. Southeast Missouri State has been playing a little bit more slowly with their defense than a season ago. Meanwhile, Chattanooga has cranked it up just a skoge. I did set my total at a 148. We have seen Southeast Missouri State be a little bit all over the place with regards to their offense, and this is a Chattanooga defense that is improved. They have now given up 71 points or fewer in 4 of their 5 games thus far this season, with the lone exception being an overtime game that they played. So it is a circumstance where I'm going to be taking a look at the under, and with Chattanooga, could only set them as a 12-point favorite. So taking the points with Southeast Missouri State along with the under. 7-13, 7-14 on the betting board. Old Dominion plays host to Drexel. Drexel is a very slight underdog in a lot of spots, anywhere between a pick'em to a 1-point dog. Totals between 129 and 130, and with Old Dominion, I do feel like they should be the favorite. I set them as a 2.5-point favorite. You're going to be willing to take them as a pick'em / right there on the money line at about a -110 or so. As for Old Dominion, they do a very solid job with their defense, and really both of these teams are pretty good defensively. It's all about what you're going to be able to get on the offensive side of things, and for Drexel, they run pretty much everything through Amari Williams, who's been very incredible at stuff in the stat sheet. 12.5 points, 9.5 boards. He's able to give you a block. Last year, chipped in there a steal and a half per contest. Hasn't given quite as much of that thus far this season, but we have noticed that he has been a little bit more limited with his minutes, and last time he took the floor, he only played 10 minutes against Queens, and that's a little bit of a concern for me. It does feel like there might be a little bit of something acting up, as his minutes are down from a season ago, and you've got a backcourt that just can't shoot. Right now, Drexel is shooting 24.9% from 3, which that'll improve. They are a better team than shooting 24% from 3-point range. GME Butler, he is seasons ago, shot 45% from 3, and this year he's shooting 12. I don't think he's as good as that 45. I also don't think he's as bad as this 12. You've also got Justin Moore, who's been able to give you more in terms of facilitation, 3.5 assists, chips in their 12 points per game, but it is a Drexel team that they turn the ball over 12 times per game, despite the fact that they play extremely slow, and they have to go up against an Old Dominion team that they do a solid job of being able to rebound by committee. Chauncey Jenkins, Tyrone Williams, these 2 guys, they have been solid out there in the backcourt with a combined 28.5 points, nearly 13 rebounds. Jenkins is currently shooting 50% from 3, and the team as a whole, 41% from the outside. That should certainly cool down just a little bit, but I do like what they've been able to get out of pretty much their designated rebounder into Rico Williams. He's done a great job being able to haul in their 6.5 rebounds at 2 points per game. Last year, he had about 6 points, 6 boards per game, and he began the season a little bit banged up. Missed the first 2 or 3 games. He's been back to the fold, and he's been able to do a good job of being able to contribute. And I think they've got a nice upside guy in R.J. Blakeney, who began his career at Dayton. He was a starter the last 3 seasons, where he was logging the last years about 6.5 points per contest. Could never really ascend, but it's been a career about 33% three-point shooter. As a 6'6" combo player, I think he brings a nice little wrinkle to this Old Dominion team that I think is going to be able to do a solid job of locking down on defense. Old Dominion right now has their defensive numbers out of sorts because their last 2 games were against Arkansas and Princeton, who have had very nice starts to the season. Meanwhile, for Drexel, credit where credit is due. This team has given up 72 points or fewer in every one of their games as far as the season, but the offense really having a tough time getting it going. 65 points or fewer in all but one of their games. So good old situation of something's got to give. I did set my total at 128.5. I do think that this is going to be a slow, grimy slog between 2 teams that are not looking to crank up the tempo. So looking at the under, but I do like the Old Dominion backcourt a little bit better. I'm going to be willing to ride with them on this rather pick-em line. 7:15, 7:16 on the betting board. It is Monmouth, and they are going to be on the road playing against Penn. The Quakers of Penn are a 6.5 point favorite. Total on this game is 147.5. For Monmouth, it has been a nice run here in this Palestra Challenge, whatever they want to call it, the multi-team event that Penn has been putting on. I do think that this is where Penn does put their foot down, though, and they really do take it to Monmouth. I am going to be willing to set Penn as an 11-point favorite. A little bit of a heartbreaker for Penn yesterday. They go to overtime, and they fall to a Belmont team that Monmouth handled quite well, but that said, with this Monmouth team, they have went from shooting in the bottom 10 in all of college basketball in terms of three-point shooting percentage to all of a sudden currently shooting north of 40% from three-point range, and I fully do think that this is a much better shooting team than they were a season ago, but I think that there is going to be some Coolidge coming in, and this is a Penn team that typically they do a pretty solid job with regards to their overall guard rotations. You've got Clark Slashert. He's been very valuable for the team, chipping in there about 19 points per contest, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, and then he is going to have to go up against Andrew Rice, who's been able to log about 22.5 points per game. He has familiarity with playing in Pennsylvania, as he was playing for the Bucknell Bison a season ago, and he has been very consistent, being able to log 20-plus points in 4 of the last 5 games, but it's what you're going to be able to get after that that is the question. We all know about Jack Collins. He's been able to give you about 12.5 points, 7 boards last year, was getting multiple steals per contest, but you really have 3 guys that give you north of about 8 or so points per contest, and then there's a big giant fall off from there. There's not a lot of rebounding to be had as well. Nikita Kutsanovsky, hopefully I said that correctly. He's been able to give you about 8 rebounds per game, but I do think that for Penn, having Nick Spinoza, who's a very versatile player that really doesn't score a lot, but does a good job down low, being able to give you about 8 rebounds per game, he's going to be able to win that battle. You've got some good facilitation with Slager giving you about 3.5 assists per game, and we have seen the freshman in Tyler Perkins be a very good scorer with right in the neighborhood about 17 or so points per game for a Penn team that they're looking to move on from Jordan Dingle. It's been a little bit rough with the turnovers with darn near 14 to 15 per contest, but the three-point shooting is there. They've done a good job of being able to add depth. This is a team that's able to go right around 9 or so deep. Then I do think that that depth is going to be hurting against a Monmouth team that they just have been so hellaciously hot from three-point range that I do think that they're going to start to cool down. So I'm going to be taking a look at Penn. I set them as an 11-point favorite. Did set my total at 145 as well. Monmouth playing a little bit more up-tempo than they did a season ago, but you also have a Penn team that has been able to do a pretty solid job with their defense, with their numbers being warped by 2 out of their last 3 games going to overtime to make it look like they're playing worse defense than what they are. So going to be looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Penn. 7-17, 7-18 on the betting board. It is Texas, and Texas is back to being a favorite at home against Wyoming, as Texas is laying between 16 to 16.5 points. Totals between 142 and 143.5 with Texas. Set them as 18.5 point favorites. I am going to be willing to lay this number with Texas. Got a bunch that has Caden Shedrick coming back and doing a nice job down low. He's playing essentially with one arm, and yet he has been able to log 14 points, right around 5 boards, a block, a steal per game. He's doing a great job of just helping out this team in all aspects, and the big key for Texas is keying in on Sam Griffin. Sam Griffin has been an incredible scorer for Wyoming, coming over from Tulsa, where he was the leading scorer for a Tulsa team. It was just terrible. He's currently shooting 52% from 3. Sam Griffin is a guy that's able to put the ball in the basket. He is a great scorer. He is not a 52% three-point shooter. We're just going to call it what it is. But on the flip side, you do have a Texas team that they are still trying to find their way a little bit in the backcourt because you've got three very talented guards. Ithiel Horton, Max A. Smith, Tyrese Hunter. These three guys are combining for about 39 points per contest. You've been able to have A. Smith and Hunter be able to combine for about 8 assists per game, and then you've got Horton as your designated shooter, shooting about 47.5% from three-point range. The Texas offensive numbers have been very good to begin the season, but they really haven't played the world's greatest competition as well, so I do want to see a little bit more there, and a big question mark with this Texas team is what sort of a tempo are they going to be playing at, because under Chris Beard, the only full season that he had over there, they were a super-duper slow team. Under Rodney Terry, it felt like they really cranked up their tempo. Now they're more of a mid-tempo team. Meanwhile, for Wyoming, this is typically a team that has a little bit more control. They're about 140th in the country in terms of total possessions per game thus far, and the big key for Wyoming, they just need to cut down on the turnovers. 16 turnovers per contest, as I still remember the game in which Akul Kott, who comes over from the non-Division I level, he was playing up against, I believe it was St. Louis, and he had 8 turnovers in the first 30 minutes of the game. He has been able to give you about 3.5 assists per contest, but that's something that needs to be nipped in the bud. You've been able to get some good three-point shooting out of Brock Wenzel, but you just don't have a lot of size down low going up against a Texas team that, while they got Chedrick, you've also got Brock Cunningham, who at 6'6", is able to give you 5 boards per contest. Dylan Mitchell's staff cheat sufferer is able to give you 2.5 assists, 8.5 boards, 11.5 points per game. Really does everything except for shoot threes, and I do think that Texas is going to be able to take it to a Wyoming team that's having a tough time taking care of the ball. So going to be willing to lay up to 18 with Texas. Did set my total at 144.5. I do think that under Rodney Terry, this is just a little bit more of an up-tempo Texas team, and for Wyoming, I do think that they're going to have a tough time defending against that. So going to be taking a look at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Texas. 719, 720 on the betting board. It is SMU, and they're playing host to Louisiana Monroe. Monroe is a 16 to a 16.5 point underdog with your total at 137, and with SMU, I did set them as a favorite of 15 points. I think we've gone a little bit too far here. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Louisiana Monroe. Can't say that I'm overly just elated with them or anything like that, but I do like what Tariq LaCour is able to bring to the table. Last year, he had 13 points per game, down a little bit with his scoring at 11.5 points per game, but he's doing it all for the team. 2.5 steals, 3.3 assists, 5 rebounds while shooting 42% from three-point range. Now the question is, can his teammates be able to give him a little bit of something in the backcourt? Someone like a Savion Gallen has given you about 7 points per contest. You've been able to get about 5 boards per game out of Jerry Nagopat. Hopefully I said that correctly. Comes over from the old St. Peter's Peacocks. And Nika, the long last name that starts with an M, the gentleman that comes over from Georgia, the country of Georgia. He's got good versatility as well. At 6'8", he's been able to log about 10 points, 4.5 boards. Is a career mid-30s three-point shooter. So I like their upside going against an SMU team that they just always struggle with their shooting. They're shooting about 33.5% from three-point range, with really getting a nice boost from Chuck Harris. Harris has come over from Butler with about 14 points per game, and he's really the lone guy that has been able to bury threes. I will say Emory Lehner has been able to shoot a relatively solid clip from three-point range as well, but I need to see a little bit more to believe it. He has spent 3 years on campus. He's been logging less than 2 points per contest. I believe that is the coach's son, by the way, and Zarique Phelps does a good job of being able to lead the team with 15 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists per game, but it just feels like a lot of misfit pieces trying to fit in. Samuel Williamson along with Ambrose Hilton down low. These two guys have been able to give you about 11 rebounds per game, but they just feel like they're sort of there. And I do think that for Louisiana Monroe, they're going to be able to do a halfway decent job on the glass. No doubt about Samuel Williamson is going to be able to win that battle, but with Monroe, do like the way that Tariq LaCour has been able to pass their sugar for the team, and I do think that that's going to keep Monroe lively against an SMU team that, quite frankly, has been a bit all over the place on offense, but it is an SMU team that clearly is looking to push tempo just a little bit more. Their numbers look a little bit worse than what they are on offense because their last 3 games came against Texas A&M, West Virginia, Wisconsin, 3 teams not playing with a lot of rhythm and tempo. So, going to be taking a look at the over. Set my total 141, and here at a 16, taking the points with Monroe. 721, 722 on the betting board. Canisius and Bowling Green do battle from Canada. Bowling Green, a 2-point underdog with your total of 146. This is like picking between 2 favorite children. I have been very bullish on both of these teams. I have bet them quite a bit thus far this season, and with Canisius. I do think that they should be the small favorite here. I set them, though, at a 1.5. So getting 2 or more, that is my buy point here on Bowling Green. I do think that this should be a relative toss-up game. So I was sort of putting myself in a spot where I'd be taking a look at whoever would be the underdog, and currently that is Bowling Green. Bowling Green was able to do a very nice job of taking it to Lipscomb yesterday, and I really like Todd Simon as a coach. Now, I don't know if they're going to go 20 of 29 from the floor in the first half like they did yesterday, but you've been able to get good production out of Marcus Hill. He's come over from the non-Division I level, and he has transformed this offense with north of 16 points per contest. Not the world's greatest facilitator, and for Bowling Green, they do need to sort through some turnover woes, but you've got so many guys down low like Sam Towns, Jason Spurgeon giving you 6 rebounds per game, and then you're able to throw in there the right around 6.5 or so rebounds per game of Rashawn Agee. So the size advantage is going to be there with Bowling Green. With Canisius, you're going to have a little bit more in the backcourt, in my opinion. Siam Ujantodal, hopefully I said that correctly, the international gentleman, has been able to give this Canisius bunch right around 14 points, 5.5 boards, and for Canisius, they are turning the ball over a little bit too much for my liking, right around 15 turnovers per game. They have been hot from 3. Going into yesterday, shooting about 38.5% from distance. I do think that that's going to cool down a little bit. I also do think you're going to get a little bit more out of Bryce Okpo moving forward. He's been able to give the team right around 4 rebounds per game, has been versatile at 6'7", popping a few more threes, with Jaco Fritz's brother, Yuri Fritz, pretty much taking over his spot as he versatile do-it-all 6'9", big man. It does make it very difficult to be able to defend this team, but Bowling Green, they do have the versatility to be able to do so, and you're staring at a pair of teams that, at their core, they do want to be playing a little bit more up-tempo. This is a Bowling Green team that, under the tutelage of Simon, I recognize it going into yesterday, they had scored 67 points of fear in each of their last 3 games, but he, at Southern Utah, always pushed tempo. We are seeing it with Canisius. This Canisius bunch, they are very much willing to get out there and run, so I did set my total at a 151.5. Going to be taking a look at the over, and with Bowling Green, 2 or more is my buy point there. I set Canisius as a 1.5 point favorite. 723, 724 on the betting board. It is Yale and Rhode Island doing battle, as Yale finds themselves as a 4 to a 4.5 point favorite, and your total is between 140 and 141. And with Yale, I did set them as a favorite of 5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 4 to 4.5 with them. With this Yale bunch, it's a squad that last year was in the top 25 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and the defense has fallen off a little bit more from a season ago, but the offense, it certainly has been much better, as Yale is currently 162nd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Just knowing what Mr. James Jones provides as a coach, I am sure that he's going to get into his guys, and the team is going to be firing a little bit more on all cylinders on defense than they have to begin the season. And I think going up against Rhode Island is a good way of being able to do so. Got a Rhode Island team that really doesn't have a lot of size down low. David Futches, he's been able to give you about 7 rebounds per game. It's Fuchs. I didn't want to say some sort of swear word without it actually being that pronunciation, so that's why we gave the interesting pronunciation. But that said, you've got Jaden House, Zeke Montgomery. These 2 guys have been able to combine for right around 31 points per game. Both are shooting north of 42.5% from 3. I do think that there's going to be a cool down there. Brandon Weston is, I'm not even kidding here, shooting 85% from 3-point range. It's on a small sample size. He's been able to log 7 points per game, but I do think that for Rhode Island, a little bit of a cooler is coming for this team, and I do think that Yale, as a result, they're going to be able to take over this game because they do a nice job down low with Danny Wolf being able to give you 8.5 rebounds per game. You've got Matt Noling, who's a very skilled, crafty, 6'6", little bit of a do-it-all player, 11 points, 4.5 boards, last year shot in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Yale as a whole has done a nice job of being able to take care of the ball as well. 10 turnovers per game, shooting 36% from 3. John Polidikis shot over 40% from 3. He's picking up right where he left off a season ago. Baz Embeg has taken some big strides forward as a good point guard for the team. 3 assists, 6 rebounds, 13.5 points per game. And with Yale, they have found a nice 7-man rotation that is able to work in tandem, including Casey Simmons, a former top 200 recruit of Northwestern. So I do think that Yale has all the ability to be able to break this game open. I do think that Yale is going to be able to improve on the defensive side of things as well. And I do think that for Rhode Island, it is going to be a little bit overwhelming to try to defend this Yale team. Now, I will say, I set my total at 141. I do think that Yale plays a little bit of better defense, but at the same time, I also think that this is a much better Yale offense than it was the season ago. And for Rhode Island, they had nowhere to go but up with regards to their offense as well. well, and their defense has been a little bit all over the place, giving up 72 plus in 3 out of their last 5 games. So here at a 140, I'm going to be taking a look at the over, and with Yale willing to lay after 4.5 with them. 725, 726 on the betting board. It is Montana State playing us a Long Beach State. Long Beach State is a favorite of between 3 and 3.5 points. Your total is 143.5 to 144. I set my line at a 3.5. So at the 3 that I'm seeing at DraftKings, that's the absolute max I'm willing to lay, but I am willing to lay a 3. Long Beach State, you've got the Traores down low who are going to be able to control the game. Abkar Traore, he's more of a 6'5", 6'6", a little bit of a versatile guy that's able to pop some threes. He'll give you a few assists. He actually leads the team with 3.5 assists per contest to go along with his 13.7 rebounds. But then you got Lucina Traore. He's more of your low post, back to the basket big man, 10 points, 9 boards, and this was one of just 3 duos that both had individually at least 7.5 rebounds per game a season ago. You have a little bit of a heat check guy for this Long Beach State team as well, Marcus Siones. You don't know whether you're going to get good or bad Marcus Siones, as he has scored 12 points or fewer in his last 3 games after going off for 35 against Michigan, and his career mid-33 point shooter, 17 points per game, shooting 33% from 3. That appears to be on brand for him, but you've got a Montana State team that has been very inconsistent in terms of what they're able to get down low. You've been able to have Robert Ford III be the stat sheet sufferer at 6 feet tall. He's given you 13 points, 8 boards, 2.5 assists. I remember when he was over at Idaho State, he did a lot of the same thing. You have a nice designated shooter in Tyler Patterson, who's been able to shoot throughout his career about 35, 36% from 3-point range for Montana State. They're only turning the ball over 8.5 times per game, but also only shooting about 31% from 3-point range as well. And for those that took Montana State -3 a few days ago against UC Riverside, I was one of those people. That was one of the most hellacious beats you'll ever find, but we move on from that. But I do think that Long Beach State, because they do have now a few more supporting pieces in the backcourt. You bring in Messiah Thompson from Alabama A&M, where he was a double-figure scorer. Issa Silva, he's currently only logging about 3.5 points per contest, but I do think that he's going to be able to elevate a little bit more. He's been a career about 39% three-point shooter at 6'4". I do think that that'll allow Long Beach State to be able to get the job done, as I do think that they've got a nice advantage down low. And with this Long Beach State team, we know this. They are going to push the tempo, top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game. Montana State has been a little bit more low and slow, but Long Beach State is one of those few teams to really push you out of your comfort zone. So Long Beach State team has been able to get to 80-plus points in now 4 of their last 5 games. I do think that they're going to be able to get this game at their speed. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 with Long Beach State. So my total 147.5. So going over to go along with Long Beach State, 727, 728 on the betting board. This is from Gamebridge Fieldhouse. Indiana and Harvard do battle. Harvard is an underdog of between 6.5 and 7 points with a total of 138.5 to 139.5. I did set my total at a 141. I'm going to be looking at the over with Harvard. Last season, they were playing quite slow. They weren't able to get a lot to drop from 3-point range. This year, they are a much more explosive offense with having a freshman in Malik Mack come in, and he has been the Mack truck for this team. 20 points, shooting 45.5% from 3, 5.5 assists to about 1.8 turnovers per game. We should see a little bit of regression there, but clearly he is elevating a Harvard team that a season ago, they just couldn't get anything to go from 3-point range. Now they're shooting 39% from 3. Now, again, I think we should see a little bit of drop-off there, but you also have some nice rebounding with this bunch, as well as you've had Justice Jobar, who's been able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game. You've got 16 points, right around 8 boards out of Chisholm Okpara as well. He's been a guy that's really been impressing me as well, but you do take a look at the flip side for Indiana, and I do think that they're finally going to be able to figure this out. This is essentially a home game for them. I recognize that this is marked as a neutral court game, but Gamebridge Fieldhouse is out there in Indianapolis, Indiana, and for the Hoosiers, I mean, Khalil Ware has been tremendous. He's been able to give the team 15.5 points, 9 boards, block and a half per contest. It's just all about who do you play alongside of him, because Malik Renew, he's got good numbers, 15 points, 4.5 boards. It just doesn't feel like he's necessarily the world's greatest fit. Meanwhile, Peyton Sparks has, whenever he's gotten minutes, been able to flourish. Anthony Walker has been able to do a solid job as well. We saw these two guys in New York be able to do a very solid job, with Walker giving 11.7 rebounds in his 20 minutes against Louisville. I think that they're just overall better fits to play alongside Ware rather than Malik Renew, other than Mackenzie Mbakpo as well. It's just been not very effective in general. You do need to see this 3-point shooting percentage go up a little bit for Indiana, and Indiana's not going to be shooting like 40% from 3 or anything like that. They aren't as bad as this 23.5% 3-point shooting percentages. I mean, Mississippi Valley State isn't as bad as a 23.5% three-point shooting percentage. You've got Xavier Johnson, who's been able to work on the turnovers, just 1.8 turnovers per contest. Trey Galloway last year shot well above 40% per three. He's shooting 21% from distance this season. I do think that's going to turn around. A little bit of backcourt depth is a concern for Indiana, but I do think that they're going to get on track against this Harvard team. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 9 with Indiana, which is a game I pretty much deem as a true home game for them. And I did set my total at 141. I do think that Indiana going to start to get those shots to drop, and for Indiana, I do think that with regards to this defense, they're going to be able to figure things out a little bit more as well. So going to be diving in on the over, and with Indiana going to be willing to lay the points. 729, 730 on the betting board. Kent State plays host to College of Charleston. Charleston is between a 7 to a 7.5 point underdog with a total of 147. I said Kent State is a 5.5 point favorite, so getting 7+, going to be willing to take a shot on Charleston. Charleston just had a hellaciously bad start to the season. Through their first, I believe it was 5 games, they went 21 of 119 from three-point range. Not saying that this Charleston team is like some amazing three-point shooting team, but they are much better than that. And you've got a lot of pieces that returned from a season ago, like Ante Brazovic. He has been the top scorer for the team the last 2 seasons. 13 points, 7 boards. You've got Rain Smith, who he's a noted really good shooter. Like, you take a look at this Charleston team, the only guy that is shooting north of 33% from 3 that has taken multiple threes this year is Evan Klinmeister, and he's someone that's averaging 1.6 points per game. It is going to bounce back a little bit more for this team. Could they be more like a 32, 31% three-point shooting team? Yes, but they're better than this 24% three-point shooting. Positive variance should come in for this team, and you've got a Kent State bunch that they've been able to do a very solid job of generating steals the last few seasons. They appear to be a little bit down with that regard, but they still have a bedroth of different guys that are able to generate some turnovers. Each of their top 6 players, all between 1 and 1.3 steals per game. They don't have that guy like they had a season ago in Sincere Carey, but you've had the duo of Reggie Bass along with Jalen Solinger do a solid job of being able to provide about a combined 26 points per contest. You've also been able to get nice versatility with 9 points, 5 boards, some good three-point shooting out of Von Cameron Davis, and you really saw Chris Payton towards the back half of the season last year be able to see some good minutes and be able to utilize them after he was a bit of an afterthought coming in from Pittsburgh. He ended last season in conference play averaging 10+ points, 5+ boards per contest, and he's piggybacked that into a nice year this year. 15.5 points, 8.5 boards, a steal, a block per contest. So I do think that he's going to be able to win the battle down low, but for Charleston, what the team does very well is that they just have so much depth. They've got so many different guys that they're able to plug and play. They're able to give you different looks, and I do think that that's going to take it out of a Kent State team that isn't quite the same team at generating turnovers that they were a season ago. Now, defense has been quite rock solid, giving up fewer than 70 points at each of their last 4 games. And Charleston, they themselves are a pretty good defensive team as well, but this is a Charleston team that is looking to push some tempo, and I do think that for Charleston, the three-point shooting starts to come along as well. I did set my total at a 147.5. As a result, I'm going to be taking a look at the 147 over, and we'll take the points with Charleston. 731, 732 on the betting board. It is Seattle. They play us to UC San Diego. San Diego is an underdog of 8 to 8.5 points. Totals between 139 to 140. I said San Diego is a 6-point underdog, so I'm going to be willing to take these points with UC San Diego. They're coming off of a pretty grody loss against Idaho, but I do like what Bryce Pope is able to bring for this team. He's been able to log north of 17 points per contest. Very effective player going up against a Seattle bunch. It just feels like they're a little bit out of sorts right now because their top scorer from a season ago in Cam Tyson, he just hasn't been that guy this far this season. He's been able to log about 13 points per contest, but last few games he's just been a little bit off, and as a result, you now have Seattle averaging about 15.5 turnovers and shooting 29% from three-point range. Now, very good team rebounding from Seattle. Each of your top 4 scorers have been able to give you at least 4.2 rebounds per game. You've got someone like a Brandon Chartfield, who at 6'10", is able to shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, logs about 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. You now have Paris Dawson back in the fold as well to be able to help out this backcourt, but you're expecting a little bit more than 4.5 points per game out of him for UC San Diego. You do have quite a few different guys who are able to do a solid job on the board, so as well. Aniwana Tiat Johnson has been able to give you 7 rebounds per game. I am sure that I said that incorrectly. You've also been able to have Francis Nworke be able to do a nice job with his versatility. 16 points, 4 boards. He's able to pop some threes for San Diego. They're only turning the ball over about 11.5 times per contest, so they've been able to clean that up. And what else is big is that they've been able to get back Jerron Brooks, who was missing darn near all of last season. He began his career at USC in Washington at 6'9". He's got versatility to be able to pop some threes. Currently shooting 60% from three. We should see that die off a little bit, but it's still a career about 36% three-point shooter that's able to give you about 5 rebounds per game. I do think that that'll allow the San Diego team to hold in there while Seattle is sorting through some things with their main guy in Tyson, just not delivering what they expected. So it is a spot where I'm going to be taking a look at the points with San Diego, set them as a 6-point underdog in. I mean my total 142. Seattle's been playing at a little bit of a slower tempo. I do think that that's going to be cranked up a little bit, and I do think that there should be some positivity for a guy in Tyson the last year, averaged darn near 20 points per contest. So taking a look at the points and the over. 733, 734 on the betting board. UC Davis is going to be playing against the Sacramento State. Sac State is a 9.5-point underdog, and your totals between 141.5 and 142 for Sacramento State. I did set them as an underdog of 11.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay with UC Davis. Typically, it's a Sacramento State team that I like to back because typically they're looking to just have a road grader style, rely upon defense, even though they know that they're not going to be able to do the world's greatest job of taking care of the ball or sinking a bunch of threes. They do a good job of just coming at you and grinding out games. They've sped up their tempo a little bit this year. They're more around 200th in terms of possessions per game, whereas last season they're outside the top 250. And for the Sacramento State team, they've been very much out of sorts in the backcourt with north of 15 turnovers per game. Just feels like they're not able to find that main trigger man, as right now Duncan Powell is leading the team in assists. That's a 6'8" combo player that comes in from North Carolina A&T, and he has been terrific. 14 points, 10 boards, but you saw a Colin Wayne really be that rim protector for the team a season ago. He has now been relegated to the bench, and he's averaging about 2.5 rebounds per game. You just need to get a little bit more out of him. You've been able to get about 5 points, 6 boards out of Jacob Holt as well. He has come in from Santa Clara, and he's been able to give the team a little bit of an impact, but until you're able to figure things out in the backcourt, it's going to be rough, and you need Brandon Benson to be able to shoot the way that he did a season ago at Tulsa, where he shot 41% for three, 10 points per contest. He's been able to give the team right around 12 points per game, but it's down to shooting about 30% from three-point range, and they go up against a UC Davis team that they bring back one of the top scorers in all of college basketball from a season ago, and Elijah Pepper, when he averaged about 22.5 points per contest a season ago, picking up right where he left off last season. He's been able to give you 23 points per game. He is shooting north of 40% from three-point range. The question becomes, who is going to be able to step up around him? Kane Milling has not been that guy, only about 5.5 points per contest, but been able to get a little bit down low out of Nico Rokac. He's been able to do a solid job with about 5.5 points, 5.5 boards. I think that that's Tony Rokac's brother, so he's got some good bloodlines there. You've also been able to get in the neighborhood about 12 points per contest out of Ty Johnson to be able to help this team out as well. While UC Davis did lose a few top pieces from a season ago, having Elijah Pepper out there I think is big. And with Sacramento State just clearly in all sorts of flux, the defense is not what it was a season ago. In their last 4 games against Division I foes, they have given up at least 74 points. And for UC Davis, they are clearly playing slower than they did a season ago. They were in the top 75 in terms of possessions per game. They are well outside the top 250 right now. It does cause for an interesting battle of tempos. So I did set my total at a 139.5. Getting what we're getting right now in a 142, I'm going to be looking at the under. With UC Davis, 1 to lay up to 11 with them. 735, 736 on the betting board. It is the Dons of San Francisco playing against Minnesota from Memorial Gymnasium. And for the Dons, they find themselves as 4-point favorites, seeing a straight 4.5 out there as well. Totals between 137.5 and 138. And for the Dons, I set them as a 5.5-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay the number. This Minnesota team is a better offensive team than they were a season ago. Last year, they were 335th in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, but I do think that we should be able to see this team rise up a little bit more, and this is actually going to be the Chase Center, so a little bit of a correction there, but either way, out there in the great city of San Francisco, and for Minnesota, it's all about what Dawson Garcia is able to do for this team. 18.5 points, 8.5 boards, just a nice stat sheet suffer in general, but for Minnesota, it's just all about taking care of the ball. 14 turnovers per game, which I'm not shocked by this. They brought in Elijah Hawkins, who was great over at Howard in terms of his three-point shooting at 46%, 13.6 assists, looks tremendous. He led all of college basketball in turnovers per game, though, and that's a little bit of an issue. You've been able to get some good production out of Cam Christie. He's come in, he's been able to log about 10 points per contest, throwing in their 3 assists per game as well, but for San Francisco, they did buff up their defense in the offseason, bringing in Josh Magobo. He comes over from Missouri State. Missouri State was one of the slowest tempo teams in all of college basketball. He's done a great job down low. 15 points, 8.5 boards. You still have Vladislav Markovsky, the gentleman from the Ukraine, who's able to be a nice rim protector at about 7'1", 7'2". Mongolian Mike is someone who had 6'8". He's able to dole out the ball with 4.5 assists per game, 11 points. His three-point shooting is much better than it was a season ago. And that really takes a load off of Marcus Williams in the backcourt, who can now just go out there, create a little bit. He'll give you like a trio of assists, shooting the mid-30s from three-point range. And then when you throw in there guys like Isaiah Hawthorne, Nadio Newberry, these guys that give you like 6, 7 points per game. Even the SMU transfer, and Stefan Torvik, who at 6'8", he's able to shoot it well from three-point range as well. Makes the San Francisco team very dangerous. For Minnesota, I do like the offense is improved. They're clearly cranking up their tempo just a little bit more. And for San Francisco, this team has been quite efficient on the offensive end as well. The defense is improved, but I do think we're going to get some points here. But I do think that in the end, the Dons, they're able to prevail. I did set them as a 5.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. I do think that with this game, there's a good chance that if Minnesota's down 6 with a minute remaining, you get some late game fouls as well. So that's part of the handicap with regards to that over as well. But with that said, going to be looking at the over and willing to lay up to 5 with the Dons. 737, 738 on the betting board. We've got VCU and Penn State doing battle from Kissimmee, Florida for the ESPN Events Invitational. Penn State is a 1 to a 1.5 point favorite. Totals between 138.5 and 139.5. I did set Penn State as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. VCU, they just still look like a little bit of a disjointed team with that Sean Bairstow injury, and I do have my question marks with how quickly things are going to be able to come along in year number 2 under Ryan Odom, who's an absolutely tremendous coach, but he sort of has what he has right now, and he doesn't have a lot down low. His top rebounder has been Tubai Lawal, who's been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. And talk about a reunion. Mike Rhodes was the coach over at VCU last year. Now he's the coach over at Penn State, so welcome back, Potter. But for VCU, they're only shooting about 30.5% from three-point range. It's really caused Max Shulga to be Mr. Do-It-All. 16 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists, shooting north of 40% from three-point range. But other than Zeb Jackson, he really hasn't had a lot of support out there in the backcourt. Meanwhile, for Penn State, you have to absolutely love the game of Ace Baldwin. This guy will give you multiple steals. He shoots it well from three-point range, chips in there 12 points, able to facilitate. He has all the tools to be a tremendous guard. Meanwhile, Qudus Wahab down low has been able to give the team 10 plus rebounds per game. It is a Penn State team that is now playing much like VCU did a season ago. They are generating those 9 steals per game. It's sort of a mix of some of the guys from VCU from a season ago, like Nick Kern is back in the fold, and then you bring in someone like a Wahab. You go to Temple, and you bring in someone like a Zach Hicks, who's been able to give you 7.5 points per contest. And I do think that Puff Johnson, a former top 150 recruit of UNC, is a nice upside guy as well, just could never really log minutes at North Carolina. And we do have to see if that upside comes to fruition, but also have to like the fact that Kenay Cleary has been able to just absolutely ascend after a season ago. He was an afterthought for Penn State with about 4 points per contest. He's logging 19.5 points per game. I do think that should see a little bit of a fall off, and I do think that we're going to see some solid defense in this one, but I do think that this is going to be a nice nip and tuck game that is going to be finding the losing team fouling late, so I did set my total at 139.5. Do be mindful as well. This is going to be a very early tip time, 7:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 a.m. Eastern, so going to be taking a look at the over despite the fact that these teams might be a little bit sleepy, and I am going to be willing to lay it with Penn State, set them as a 3.5 point favorite. Now let's finally try to get online with these DK Network write-up picks. I apologize for these being garbage last week and a half. We will try to do better this week. 739, 740 on the betting board. Virginia Tech, they are going to be playing against Florida Atlantic. Florida Atlantic is a 2.5 to a 3 point favorite. Your total is between 151.5 and 152. My write-up is going to be on the under. I wish I had known that New Mexico State line was going to move as much as it did, or else I might have written that up. But that said, I set my total more around to 144. I'm going to be going in on the under. You've got a pair of teams that are not playing up tempo. Going into Saturday, so this is going to change a little bit, both of these teams were outside the top 240. In terms of total possessions per game. Now, both of these teams have been a masterclass in terms of being efficient on the offensive side of things. Virginia Tech, 17th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Old FIU is 14th, but with Florida Atlantic, what I find to be very intriguing about this team, they're, for lack of a better term, a chameleon. This dates back to the last season. They were in the top 28 in all of college basketball in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis, and at the end of the year, they were about as mid-tempo as it gets. Out of 363 D1 teams, 178th. You can't be much closer to the middle than that, and that's because when they would play against a team like UAB, they would beat them going fast. When they would play against a team like North Texas, they would beat them playing slow. This team can play at any tempo, and with Virginia Tech slowing things down, I think that they're going to do the same as well. For Virginia Tech, they're not getting a lot of second chances, ranking right around 220th in the country in terms of rebounds on shots that they miss. Now, I do think that this team is missing Justin Mutz a little bit, but I do have to give credit where credit is due. The way that Lynn Kidd has been able to play down low for Virginia Tech has been very solid. 17 points, 8 boards. He has really been able to lead this team, and both of these teams are doing a solid job not turning the ball over. You got Virginia Tech with right around about 9.5 turnovers per game, Florida Atlantic with about 10, so both of these teams have valued the ball very well. Part of the reason why for Virginia Tech is Sean Padula and what he's been able to do in the backcourt, 5.8 assists to fewer than 2.3 turnovers per game, but we should see a little bit of a fall off with the big three of Virginia Tech in their three-point shooting. Padula is shooting 46.2% from three. Hunter Couture is shooting 45.8% from three. Tyler Nichols shooting 42.9% from three. Nickel, 10.5 points per contest. Couture, 15.5 points per game. These are good shooters. They aren't going to shoot this good all season long, and it is a Virginia Tech team that has been able to get a little bit out of some of these guys, like, I always say this name incorrectly, Majel Petit, who comes over from Rice. He's been able to give you about 6 points. He's got a little bit of versatility, but for Florida Atlantic, I do like the overall veteran savvy and nature of this team. Vladislav Golden down low, I think he's going to do a good job against Kidd. 15 points, 7 boards, multiple blocks per contest. It is a bunch that is dealing with a few injuries, as I know that John Carlos Rosado was out of the fold in the team's previous game. You've had Nicholas Boyd dealing with a few injuries as well, and Elijah Martin, he's been fighting through injuries as well, so I did have to dog this FAU team a little bit as well with Florida Atlantic. They're shooting about 37.5% from three-point range despite that bad Bryant game, but I do think that if for Virginia Tech, they're going to be able to get up in this FAU team as well, as they've been 40th in the country in terms of turnovers forced per offensive play. I do think that the injuries are going to take a little bit of hold. I think that Florida Atlantic finds a way to be able to get it done, but I do think that they rely upon their defense to be able to do so here, and I do think that this is going to be a low and controlled game, even if you do see both of these teams shoot it well from three, just because of the low amount of possessions. I think that it's going to keep it under. So my DK Network right to pick, that is on the total under. I set my total at a 144, so getting north of a 150. Diving in on the under end for Florida Atlantic, I think in the end they pull it out, but with the injuries, I could only set them as a 2-point favorite despite this being played in the great state of Florida. So getting 2.5 to 3, taking the points with Virginia Tech, and my write-up that's going to be on the under. 741, 742 on the betting board. Boise State plays against Butler out there in Kissimmee, Florida, and for Boise State, they're a pick 'em to a 1.5-point favorite, and your total is 147 to 147.5. And with Butler, I did set them as a favorite of 2 points. I'm going to be looking at them outright on the money line. Feels like Thad Matta is doing a good job of getting things turned around after last season. It was less than savory for this Butler team, and they have found that go-to guy in Pierre Brooks. Brooks has been able to do a nice job with about 15.5 points per game, and now he's got a point guard that's able to get him the ball, and Posh Alexander. Alexander has always struggled with his jump shot. He's shooting about 28% from three, no shocker there, but he does a tremendous job being able to dish out the ball, giving out right around 4.5 assists and 2.3 turnovers per game. Just the fact that he's away from Andre Carmelo, I think, is good for him. DJ Turn It Up Davis, he comes over from UC Irvine, where he shot 40+% from three. He's shooting about 37% from three with 12.5 points per contest thus far this season. Now, if you've got a knock on Butler, they don't necessarily have tremendous size. You've had Jalen Thomas give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. Andre 3000 screen from Bucknell has been able to give you 6 rebounds per game as well, but it's not like Boise State is necessarily batting down the hatches with supreme size, as they've had to look to Cam Martin to be a little bit of a do-it-all big man at 6'9", logging 2.5 assists, 7 boards, 9 points per game. I like his overall versatility, but you can tell that this team is missing Marcus Shaver from a season ago. Jabuzo Agbo, he's been a very solid 3-point shooter for the team. Last year shot 40% for three with a double-figure amount of points per game, shooting about 39% thus far this season for a Boise State team that, in the end, they will shoot better than 29.5% from three, but I just don't know how great of a fit Omar Stanley is with the team. 11 points, 3.5 boards for him after he was a part-time starter over at St. John's a season ago, where he He shot 45.5% from three, but it really wasn't on volume. You certainly have one of the better players in all of college basketball, Tyson Dagenhart. He's able to space out the floor, giving the team right around 13 points per contest, but I do think that for Butler, they've done a nice job of being able to remake this roster. They do need to improve a little bit on the defensive side of things as the competition has gotten bigger and bigger. They've given up 74-plus points in each of their last three games, and you've got a Boise State team that they've had a little bit of a rough run of it on offense themselves, so it's a good old situation of something's got to give. I did set Butler as the favorite of 2 points, so I'm going to be looking at them outright on the money line, and I do think that this Butler offense is for real, but I think we've gone a little bit too far, especially with Boise State being a lower tempo team, and it's not like Butler is necessarily running it and gunning it either. So set my total at 142, diving in on the under of 147, and taking Butler outright on the money line. 743, 744 on the betting board. It is Iowa State, and they're playing against Texas A&M. This is from Florida as well. With Iowa State, they're anywhere between a pick 'em to a 1-point underdog, with your total between 137 and 138.5 for Iowa State. The defense, even with them stepping up in competition as opposed to what they had at the beginning part of the season, it's still been tremendous. This is an Iowa State team that's still in the top 20 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and really both of these defenses have been quite incredible. You got a Texas A&M team that I fully recognize that they got torched against Florida Atlantic a few days ago, but all in all, I do like what I'm seeing out of this bunch. They've got a go-to scorer in Wade Taylor IV that I do think is going to be the best scorer out there on the floor. He's currently logging 21 points, 4.5 assists, 3.5 rebounds, just impacting the game in so many ways. But with Taymon Lipscomb and the way that he's been able to ascend, I do think that it's going to be a little bit too much for Texas A&M, which is why I did set Iowa State as 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them as a pick-up / outright on the money line. With Iowa State, they always do such a good job of being able to generate steals. They're not a team that's necessarily going to completely pound you on the glass or anything like that, which should allow Henry Coleman to have a good day down low. He's been able to give this Texas A&M bunch 14 points, 8.5 boards, and then you've been able to get a lot of rebounding as well out of Anderson Garcia, who came over from Mississippi State a few seasons ago, not knowing anything in terms of scoring. 2.7 points and 7.8 rebounds per game. He is nearly tripling the amount of rebounds as opposed to the amount of points that he's had, so that's something very interesting. But for Texas A&M, even though they do a good job of taking care of the ball, 8.5 turnovers per game, they don't necessarily get the world's greatest looks from three-point range, and even when Iowa State isn't generating a lot of steals, they still do a good job of being able to cut off the three-point arc. You've also got Milan Silovic, who's been able to give you 14 points. He's shooting it well from three-point range and north of 50%. That's going to taper off a little bit, but I do think that this is the best version of Iowa State in their offense that we have seen under TJ Alzenberger. I think bringing in Keshawn Gilbert from UNLV was massive, where he was logging about 11.5 points, shooting it well from three-point range. Iowa State, again, I do think that they're going to have a few issues with regards to their three-point shooting, but the fact that they're only turning the ball over right around 9 times per game while they're doing a great job of generating all these turnovers should allow them to be able to get to the window on this one. I do like Iowa State outright on the money line, and neither of these teams are really going up-tempo. I do think that this is going to be a defensive-oriented game. Both of these teams, they do pride themselves on their defense, so set my total 135.5. I'm going to be diving in on the under and going to be taking a look at Iowa State outright on the money line / as a pick-em. And now we have a quartet of games without numbers, as this begins with 745, 746 on the betting board. All 4 of these games to wrap up the normal Las Vegas betting board are from the Bahamas. It is UMKC and Middle Tennessee doing battle. And in this one, I did set Middle Tennessee as a 7-point favorite with a total of 127. So 126.5 or less. Going to be taking a look at the over. 127.5 or higher. Going to be diving in on the under with UMKC. This squad has been just off-putting, to say the least. I thought Allen David and Becca Jr. was really going to be able to take over down low, and this team was going to be playing a low and slow style in which they were featuring Anderson Kopp quite a bit with regards to his scoring, and they are featuring Anderson Kopp quite a bit in terms of his scoring. He has been able to give the team right around about 14 points per game, but they're having Anderson Kopp just do a little bit too much. A guy coming off of injury who's been always a solid college basketball player, but it's not like he should be the complete focal point of an offense, in my opinion. Currently, he's logging about 14.5 points, chipping in their 4 boards, 3.5 assists. When he went down last season, he was shooting 44% from 3. A year before that, in a full season, did shoot 42% from three-point range, but he doesn't have a lot of help around him. I was mentioning Mbeka Jr. down low last year. He gave the team 7.5 rebounds per game. Inexplicably, his minutes have been slashed to like 13 per contest, and now he's only giving the team right around 4 rebounds per game. He's been able to get in the neighborhood about 13 to 14 points per game. Jamar Brown, he has come in from the junior college ranks, and he has been quite solid for the team. He's shooting north of 35% from three-point range, but With UMKC, they shoot 30% from three-point range. They're generating about 13 turnovers per game as well, so you've got a lot of issues there. And for Middle Tennessee, this team still has the rough and tumble defense that they had a season ago, but the offensive pieces that were there last year, they are gone, as that has resulted in the team turning the ball over right around 14 times per contest as they lose 4 of their top 6 scorers from last season, which puts the onus on Elias King along Cameron Weston to be able to step up. King has been able to give you 13.5 points, a block, a steal per game, shooting 38% from three-point range. And in the 2 games that Weston has actually played, as he was a big-time contributor from last year with about 3 assists, 10.5 points per game, he was able to log 11 points per contest, but looks like he's going to be out of the fold once again. That means that you're going to be looking at a lot more of Justin Porter, who's been okay in the backcourt. He's been able to give you about 10.5 points per game, but it leaves you really without a point guard for this team, and without having a ton of size down low. Jared Coleman-Jones has to be that main guy. He's been able to give the team 7 rebounds per game, but I'm just that far out on UMKC where I still set Middle Tennessee as a 7-point favorite. I just have no idea what's going on with UMKC's rotations. Marvin Menzies has proven that he's just not a very good coach in general. It's been very sloppy offense, to say the least, with UMKC. They were able to take Brown to overtime yesterday. That was able to push them over the 72-point plateau for the first time against a D1 opponent all season long. And I do think that Middle Tennessee going to continue to be a meat grinder. They've been very tremendous on defense. They've been tremendously awful on offense. Middle Tennessee has not broken the 70-point plateau since opening night. So, spot where I did something I told you where 126.5 or less, looking at the over 127.5 or higher. I'm going to be taking a look at the under with Middle Tennessee. Want to lay up to 6.5 with them, 7.5 or more. Take the points with UMKC. 747, 748 on the betting board. It is Ohio and Brown doing battle from the Bahamas. No numbers up on this game, but I said Brown is a 5-point underdog. So what can Brown do for you if they lose by fewer than 5 points? I believe that they can make you money. And in terms of the total, 142.5 or less. Going to be taking a look at the over, 143.5 or higher. Going to be taking a look at the under for Brown. They were really a tremendous defense a season ago, and we haven't seen quite as much of that fire and zeal thus far this season, but I do think that they're going to be able to pick it up and do a solid job down low. You've got an Ohio team that really doesn't have anyone that's giving you north of 6 boards per contest. Meanwhile, Nana Owusu-Anane along with Kalu Enya, these 2 guys, they've been able to combine for about 15 rebounds per game. They both shoot in the mid-30s from three-point range, and you've got a go-to scorer in Keno Lole Jr. has been tremendous for this Brown bunch. He is putting in there about 20 points per game. Last year, shot 39.9% from three-point range. That's taking a little bit of a dive because he's had to take a few more shots without having in the fold the North Carolina transfer in Paxton Wojcik. But all in all, I do like the way that things have come along for the offense. They need to get back to those defensive roots, and it's not going to be easy against an Ohio team that last few seasons, they've been a top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. You've got the AJs, AJ Brown, AJ Clayton combining for 26 points per contest. They entered into yesterday shooting north of 40% from three-point range, and Jalen Hunter is one of the more underrated point guards in all of college basketball. This guy is currently logging about 16 points. He's been able to chip in there 5.5 boards, just under 5.5 assists per game. Not necessarily the world's greatest three-point shooter this season, but coming off of a season in which he shot about 41% a season ago, and darn near everyone else on Ohio has been able to do a solid job from the outside. You've got Sharif Mitchell, who comes in from Creighton. He's been able to log double figures, and even though you don't have that one guy for Ohio, that's necessarily been an elevator in terms of rebounding, as Clayton has been the main guy with about 6.5 rebounds per game. You've still got some size with Gabe Witznitzer on the bench, and you've got each of your top 5 scorers logging at least 4.8 rebounds per game. So I do think that Brown is going to be able to control the glass, but Ohio, they're going to find a way to get some second chances, and I do believe that this Ohio backcourt going to overwhelm Brown. So I did set my line at 4.5 with regards to the max I'm willing to lay it with Ohio, 5.5 or more. I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Brown, and then 142.5 or less, going to be taking a look at the over, 143.5 or higher to the under. Brown has been a top 75 team in terms of tempo. I do think that they're going to try to scale that back quite a bit, and Ohio, I do think that they're going to dial back their current top 20 pace in terms of total possessions per game. 749, 750 on the betting board. It is Delaware and George Washington doing battle. No numbers up on this game, but I'm willing to lay up to 4 with George Washington. Set them as a 4.5 point favorite, 5 or more. Going to be taking a look at the points with Delaware, and then 144 or less. Going to be taking a look at the over, 145 or higher. Going to be diving in on the under. Got a Delaware team that's playing very controlled right now. Going into yesterday, 293rd in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and the George Washington offense, you could tell it was just playing a little bit too fast for its own good. They're still one of the top teams in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, but they have really done a better job on the defensive side of things. The reason why George Washington is thrown a little bit for a loop in terms of the total possessions per game is that they're coming off of a double overtime game against Ohio, which that does very much warp the numbers. Prior to that, they had allowed 60 points after 67 points to New Hampshire. So I do think that this team is coming along for the ride quite well. And then you've got a Delaware team that they have been very efficient with their defense as well. Delaware has allowed north of 70 points in just one game thus far this season. That was yesterday against UNC Greensboro. Got a Delaware team that I do think is going to be able to do a solid job down low with Christian Ray being able to give you about 9 points, 9 rebounds per contest, and Gerald Drumgoulet, who comes over from Albany. He's been able to do a very nice job, shooting 36% from 3, 11 points per game. And under the radar, Jelon Trent has been a stat sheet sufferer for this Delaware team. He's shipping in there like 9 points, 3.5 assists, 4 boards, a block, a steal, you name it, he does it. And that's all in support of Jair Davis, who's been logging just under 20 points per game. But you know what? On the flip side, you've got a George Washington team with a 20-point per game score, and that'd be James Bishop IV. James Bishop IV has been absolutely tremendous on this side of things, being able to give you about 19 points per contest. He plays very well alongside of Maximus Edwards, who's been really able to do a nice job stepping up on the glass with about 16 points, 8 boards. But you know who also has identical stats? Garrett Johnson, 16 points, 8 boards out of him as well. Both of these guys entered into yesterday shooting about 50% from 3. I do think that George Washington going to regress a little bit with their 39% 3-point shooting, and because of how fast they play, they do commit about 15 turnovers per game. And James Bishop is nearly 5 turnovers per game. That is towards the top of all of college basketball. He's going to need to cut down on that a little bit. And thinking about it, I do think that this might be a little bit more of an up-tempo game. So this is a spot where I'm actually going to shade up my total a little bit more. I was thinking a little bit more along the lines of 144.5 to start out with, but at a 146 or less, I'd be taking a look at the over. 147 or higher, going to be taking a look at the under, because I do think that George Washington is going to be able to crank it up tempo. And plus, I do think that this is going to be a game in which it's going to be close enough where you're probably going to get some late game fouling. Willing to lay up to 4 with George Washington, 5 or more, taking the points with Delaware, and anything of a 146 or less, going to be taking a look at the over. 751, 752 on the betting board. UIC and UNC Greensboro do battle. UNC Greensboro finds themselves off the board, but on my book, I set them as a 5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 4.5 with Greensboro, 5.5 or more, taking the points with UIC, and then 136.5 or less, taking a look at the over, 137.5 or higher, going to be taking a look at the under. UNC Greensboro has actually cranked up their tempo a little bit more this season. They're more around 261st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They're up a full possession from where they were a season ago, but this UIC team under Luke Yakulich, who was really one of the masterminds of that defense of Michigan when they made the national title game in 2018, they've been able to play some much better basketball thus far this season. I've been quite impressed by them. You've got a UIC team that has Toby Okani, who's been, as a 6'8", little bit of a combo player, shooting just below 40% from 3-point range. He's been able to help facilitate a little bit, giving you a double-figure amount of points. That's an invaluable asset to have, and you go up against a UNC Greensboro team that you know that this team is going to be very well coached under Mike Jones. You're going to be asking who, and I'm going to say Mike Jones, because right now you've got the Langleys doing a good job of just being able to know their roles. Keyshawn Langley is more of the scorer of this team. Kobe Langley, he does the little things. Kobe Langley entered into yesterday with 7 assists, a steal and a half, only about 6 points per contest, but really keeping the offense moving. Meanwhile, Keyshawn, he's one of your main scorers, 17 points, 2 steals, shooting just below 40% from 3-point range. And then Mikael Brown-Jones entered into yesterday shooting 57% from 3, and he did not miss a single 3 against Delaware. So he's shooting north of 57% from 3 right now with about 19 points per contest. I certainly think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off there, but at 6'8", he's going to be a very hard guard for Okani and company. But I do think that with UIC, CJ Jones being able to give you about 4 assists per game has been critical. You lose Jace Carter from a season ago, but you bring in Isaiah Rivera, who I really liked over at Colorado State. He's done a solid job shooting north of 45% from 3-point range over the last few seasons. Last year, shot a career low of 37.8% from 3. This year, he's shooting above 50% from distance. The big key is you need to get a little bit more down low outside of Okani. You don't have anyone else really giving you north of 5 rebounds per game, but I do think that you might be able to get a little bit more moving forward on the international man of mystery and Philip Skabasi. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly, but he's been able to give the team right around 5 boards per contest, and if you're able to get anything whatsoever out of some of these ancillary pieces, because Marquise Kennedy, who comes in from Loyola Chicago, is out of the fold, that has resulted in Jones having the ball in his hands a little bit more, and has also resulted in more minutes for Stephen Clay, who's been able to give you about 8 points per game, shooting above 40% from 3-point range. That'd be beneficial for UIC. I do think the thing's going to be a little bit more defense-oriented, so 136.5 or less, looking at the over, 137.5 or higher, diving in on the under. And then with regards to Greensboro, willing to lay up to 4.5 with them, 5.5 or more, going to be taking a look at the points with UIC. And now let's hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-569, 306-570. It is UNC Asheville, and they are going to be playing against Western Kentucky. This is out there from the great country of Canada, and with UNC Asheville, they find themselves as underdogs of 3 to 3.5 points. Your total's anywhere between 151.5 and 153. I did set Western Kentucky as the underdog in this spot of 3.5 points. I've got this completely reversed. I'm going to be taking a look at Asheville right on the money line. UNC Asheville is going to have the best player out there on the floor in Drew Pember. Season ago as a 6'11" combo player. Chipped in there 20 points, shot nearly 40% from three, multiple blocks per game. Absolutely love the way that he's able to stuff the stat sheet. And for Western Kentucky, I do feel like there's going to be some growing pains with this backcourt. They're looking to mix and match with a bunch of different guys that come in via the transfer portal. And I like Steve Lutz as a coach, but certainly faces an uphill battle with Deontay Allen regressing a little bit from last season. He has not been what he was a season ago. He had 0 points in the game yesterday. He's been able to get some relatively good production with right around about 14.5 points per game of Don McHenry, but it is a Western Kentucky team that I think is going to be a little bit inconsistent with their shooting in terms of being able to take care of the ball. That's a little bit of an issue for this team, as well as they're really looking to crank up the tempo. About 12.5 turnovers per contest. Could be better, could be worse, but they are also not necessarily the world's greatest shooting team. I think that they should be better than the 25% three-point shooting thus far, but I do think that they're going to lose the battle on the glass as well, because you've got down low Babacar Faye, who comes over from Charleston. He's been able to give you right around 5 rebounds per game, but you've got good facilitation on the flip side with having Caleb Burgess for UNC Asheville, Delo right around 6 assists per contest. Fletcher Abey has been able to shoot north of 40% from three-point range, and then you've got so many guys down low that they do a nice job of being able to support Drew Pember, being able to give you about 5 to 6 rebounds per game. They're a little bit more in the background, but you're able to get a lot out of someone like a Jamion Battle, someone like Nicholas McMillan. Both of these guys have been able to combine for in that realm of about 11 rebounds per game. So I do like Asheville in this spot. I'm right on the money line. Western Kentucky has really cranked up their tempo, and for UNC Asheville, the team last year was one of the top 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, and certainly has been able to put up some very big numbers. So looking at Asheville, I'm right on the money line, and we'll take a look at this total over 306-571, 306-572. Lafayette and Belmont do battle from the Palestra, with Belmont a 6 to a 6.5 point favorite, and your total is between 148.5 and 150, and with Belmont, set them as a 6.5 point favorite. So 6 is a max I'm going to be willing to lay, but I'm going to be willing to lay it. You do have to wonder if Belmont is going to be a little bit tired after playing that overtime game yesterday, as this is game number 3 in 3 days for them, and while Lafayette is also on game number 3 in 3 days, Lafayette plays at a very, very slow tempo, so it's not like they're looking to absolutely push things up or anything like that. And with this Lafayette team, they have been able to do a good job of holding up at the point of attack as well with their defenses. They have now given up 72 points or fewer in each of their last 3 games. And it's a Lafayette team that does lose quite a few pieces from its season ago, but do like the way that Justin Vanderbond has been able to take over a little bit more. He's been able to give this team about 10.5 points in the neighborhood, about 5 boards at 7 feet tall. He is going to be a load for Belmont to go up against, and Belmont has been a less than savory defense. They were able to look quite a bit better in that game against Penn yesterday, but we do know that they're going to be a hard-to-guard team, because you've got Malik Dia along Cade Tyson combining for about 29 points per contest. Both of these guys are 6'7" or taller with some versatility. Tyson, the much better three-point shooter at north of 40%. Dia, a little bit more of a low-post guy that's able to give you a block, a steal and a half per game, and the big key for this team, in my opinion, is getting Keyshawn Davidson to fire on all cylinders once again. He has not been himself, doling out a little bit over 3 assists per game, but it has really been Jacoby Gillespie who's had to go into takeover mode for this offense, as he's been able to register about 16.5 points per game. Never has been a great three-point shooter, but he's able to give you about 4.5 assists per game, and is able to find those better three-point shooters like Chase Willingham. So it is a spot where I did set Belmont at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with them. And Lafayette, over the last 2 years, has been one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball. With Belmont having tired legs, I think that this is too lofty of a total. Semi-total 144.5, diving in on the under, and going to be willing to lay up to 6 with Belmont. 306-573, 306-574. It is Lamar and Delaware doing battle from the Montage Center, with Lamar a 4 to 4.5 point favorite with your total between 147.5 and 148. I did set Lamar as a 7-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it. I really do like this Lamar team. They bring back pretty much 5 out of their top 8 scorers from a season ago. Adam Hamilton, who was injured a season ago, he has come back and he's been able to do a great job down low with about 7.5 rebounds per game. And I think he should be able to take you to Alston Andrews on the flip side for Delaware St, who had an incredible 0-point and 7-rebound log a day ago as he comes over from Illinois State. Has some good size at right around 6'10", 6'11", but you just need a little bit more outside of him. You're really banking on Brandon Stone being able to develop. He's someone that stands right around 6'11", is able to pop some threes, but he's been missing due to injury. You've got a backcourt that involves Montez Robinson and Javon Muniz, who's been able to combine for in that neighborhood about 29 points per game. And with Robinson, he's been able to shoot about 41% from 3, but all in all, it's a Delaware State team that entered into yesterday shooting 37.5% from the floor, 28% from 3 with 17 turnovers per game. This Delaware team actually has some relatively okay pieces on offense, but they can't stop turning the ball over. Now they have to go up against a Lamar team that they're forcing about 8 steals per game as well. Got the likes of a Terry Anderson, who's been able to give you 11.5 points, shooting north of 35% from 3. Chris Pryor has done some great work in the backcourt, being able to give out right around 3.5 assists per game as well. This is a veteran backcourt that has really no one alpha dog, but you've got 6 different guys for Lamar that entered into yesterday with between 11.8 and 10 points per contest. I like the balance of Lamar. I think that they get it done against Delaware State. I did set my total at 143. Lamar is looking to push a little bit more tempo, but they're not really looking to go at a breakneck pace. And for Delaware State, they just can't protect the ball. So going to be going in on the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Lamar. 306.575, 306.576. You've got Sacred Heart, and they're going to be on the road facing off against St. Joe's. St. Joe's looks to not be average Joe's as 11 to 11.5 point favorites, and your total between 149 and 149.5. And with St. Joe's, I set this line at 10, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Sacred Heart. Sacred Heart, I think, has a good chance of being able to win the NEC this season because you've got Nico Galletti, who is so versatile at about 6'6", being able to log 13.5 points, 7 boards, 2 steals, shoots it well from 3-point range. Now, I do think that Sacred Heart is going to see a fall from their north of 40% 3-point shooting, but you're bringing a pair of guys from the Metro Atlantic in Raheem Solomon and Aiden Carpenter. These guys have been able to combine for a little bit over 20 points per contest, both shooting 39% plus from 3-point range. And then you've got a St. Joe's team that does certainly have good top-end talent. Eric Reynolds is a good scorer at 17 points per game. He's able to dish out the ball as Lynn Greer. He's really your more main floor general. Doesn't score as much as Reynolds does, but about 5 assists per game for a team that turns the ball over 11.5 times per game for a mid-tempo team. That's relatively solid, but if you're looking to really take apart the Sacred Heart team, I think that you need to do it with size, and been able to get about 7.5 rebounds per game out of Chris Esedonko, hopefully I said that correctly, comes in from France. He's been able to do a solid job of sharing things up down low, but past that, you don't really have a ton, and it is the St. Joe's team that I do have a few question marks in terms of their depth. I was hoping for a little bit more out of someone like a Christian Wilborn, who a season ago, he was a part-time starter that was able to log about 6 points per game, and it feels like he's regressed just a little bit. And for Sacred Heart, you've got Tanner Thomas, who's been able to chip in there about 14.5 points per game. Sacred Heart doing a little bit of a better job on the glass than I was expecting as well. And with their overall efficiency on offense, that should be able to help them remain lively in this game against the St. Joe's team that has been a little bit better on defense, but it's been very much touch and go with them, as it feels like they've dominated bad competition. Then against the better teams, they do have a little bit of a tougher time being able to rise up, say, in that game against Kentucky. So it is a spot where I did set my line at 10. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Sacred Heart, and with the total, set mine at a 154. So also going to be taking a look at the over. 306.577, 306.578. LaSalle and Coppin St do battle. LaSalle is a home favorite of 18 points, and your totals between 132.5 and 133. With LaSalle, set them at an 18.5. At 18, I'm not willing to lay anything more than that, but I am willing to lay 18. It's a bunch in LaSalle that has a very nice backcourt. You need a little bit more down low. They had the Drame brothers a season ago, and losing them has been a little bit rough, but you do have Jamari Breakis, who's been able to do a solid job giving you double figures. He's able to duel out the ball with multiple assists per game, so I think that he's got a lot of upside. And with the Coppin St team, you're just looking for any sort of sign of brightness whatsoever with this team, as it has been very, very rough for them to say the least. Your main scorer has been Justin Winston. He comes over from St. Bonaventure, where he was actually a starter during the 2019-20 season, was logging about 8.5 points per game, and he's been able to chip in there 10.5 points, shooting in the neighborhood of about 26% from three-point range. You need that to improve, but it's actually above average for this Coppin St team as a whole, shooting 20.7% from three-point range, and I certainly do think that they're going to shoot better than that at the end of the season, but the only guy shooting above 30% from three for anyone that has attempted 1 or 1 million threes is Malik Battle. And that's a big issue. And you don't have anything down low for the Coppin St team. There's not a single guy that's averaging north of 4 rebounds per game. So even though LaSalle loses a lot down low, they're still going to be able to win that battle with someone like a Tashawn Shepard, who's been able to give you about 5.5 boards, 11.5 points per game. Anwar Gill, it's just a stat sheet, suffered 12 points, 4.5 assists. This team does a good job with each other top three guards, Gill, Breakus, and Khalil Brantley, all giving you at least 3.5 assists per game. And for LaSalle, they only turn the ball for 8.5 times per game. Meanwhile, Coppin St is creating more turnovers than Sarah Lee's Bakery. So, going to be willing to lay the number with LaSalle. And for Coppin St, I mean, forget about this team being able to get to 60. Can this team get to 50? As they have scored 49 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games. So I did set my total at 128.5. I just don't think Coppin St does their part with this total. So looking at the under, and want to lay it with LaSalle. 306-579, 306-580. It is Wofford and Lipscomb doing battle from Canada. And Lipscomb is an 8-point favorite, and your total is 160.5. I set Lipscomb as a 5-point favorite. Perhaps we saw a little bit of a sign of brightness from this Wofford defense. They entered yesterday a bottom 10 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and while Wofford still gave up 85 yesterday. Keep in mind that that was in 45 minutes and not in 40 minutes against a UNC Asheville team that does like to crank it up tempo. And for Wofford, I think the big key for them is just being able to win the battle on the glass, because you've got a Lipscomb team that is currently dealing with not having Jacob Onyesovic in the fold, and as a result, they don't have a single guy that's been able to log north of 5 rebounds per game this far this season. Owen McCormick has been able to do an okay job of being able to haul in there right around 4.5 boards, but that's about it. For Lipscomb, they've been very reliant upon a backcourt of A.J. McGinnis along with Darren Boyd. These two guys have combined for about 36 points per game. They're combining to shoot well over 45% from three-point range, and I do think that there's going to be a little bit of off. Lipscomb is a very good shooting team. I don't think that they're a nearly 40% good three-point shooting team. And then in the backcourt for Wofford, you do have a nice trio. You've been able to have a pair of guys in Corey Tripp along with Dylan Bailey be able to combine for in that neighborhood about 27 points per contest. Tripp has been your main facilitator with about 3.5 assists per game. And then you've gotten 60.5% three-point shooting out of Chase Cormier. Now, I do think that is going to be taking a little bit of a dive as he comes in from Northeastern a season ago where he was shooting like 30% from three-point range, but that's been helpful for the team. Kyler Filewich, he's been able to log about 7 rebounds per game down low for the team. And for Wofford, even though the defense, it has been less than terrific to say the least, it does feel like it's improving just a little bit, and it's a Lipscomb team that has put up some tremendous numbers on offense. I do think that we are going to see a fall off in that three-point shooting, though. That should keep Wofford in this game. I did set my line at 5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Wofford, and in terms of the total, I set it at a 153. This is game number 3 in 3 days for both of these teams, so I do think that the legs in general for Lipscomb may not be there. So taking a look at the under and the points with Wofford, 306-581, 306-582. Appalachian State is going to be playing against Austin Peay. The old Governators are between 9 and 10 point underdogs, and your total is between 133.5 and 135.5. And with Austin Peay, I did set them as underdogs of 8.5 points. So I am going to be willing to take the points with the old Governators, even though Austin Peay is quite a bit of a new look team. They bring in a lot of Corey Gibson's guys. Corey Gibson was the coach over at Northwestern State a season ago, so he brought in there DeMarcus Sharp, Jamonta Black, really the top 2 scorers for the team from the season ago. A pair of guys that shot both north of 38% from three-point range, and I do think that that's a good way to immediately get results when you do have a first-year coach. On top of that, the team has been able to do a little bit better down low than I expected. They're still going to lose that battle against the likes of a Justin Abson, who's able to give you multiple blocks. He's been able to log 9 rebounds per game, but DeMarcus Sharp, who did an okay job of rebounding last year with 5 boards, 5 assists, 19.5 points per game, he's able to give the team 8.5 boards, 5.3 assists, 18.5 points per game. Now, last year shot 54% from 3, and he's made as many threes as myself this far this season, and that'll be 0. But the fact that he's been able to help on that front has been very good for the team. And then on top of that, you've been able to have a little bit down low out of Daniel Luce. He's from Clarksville, Tennessee. I believe that his father actually used to coach his team / grandfather. He's been able to give the team about 4.5 rebounds per game. For Austin Peay, they're shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, but they're generating right around 10 steals per game, going up against an Appalachian State team that typically they like to play very slow, very controlled, just 10 turnovers per contest, but they're also shooting 58% at the free throw line. That has been a little bit of an issue for them last few seasons. You've been able to get good production out of Donovan Gregory along CJ Mantis. They've been able to combine for a little bit over 26 points per game, with Mantis shooting over 40% from three-point range. All sorts of versatility with this Appalachian State team and quite a bit of size. But aside from the 3.5 assists that you've gotten out of Jordan Marsh, who's a true freshman that has been utilized a little bit more off the bench, you really don't have a lot of facilitation. I think that should allow Austin Peay to be able to generate some turnovers and keep them in this game. I set my line at 8.5, so I'm going to be taking a look at the points with Austin Peay, and I did set my total at 138.5. Under Corey Gibson, I do think that Austin Peay is going to be cranking up the tempo a little bit more, and for Appalachian State, they have been a little bit more of an offense-oriented group this far this season, breaking 70-plus in 4 out of their last 5 games. So looking at the over and taking the points with Austin Peay. 3 of 6, 583, 3 of 6, 584 is Robert Morris playing goes to Fairleigh Dickinson. Fairleigh Dickinson is an underdog of 4.5 points, and your total on this game is 153.5. I set this line at 7. I'm going to be willing to lay with Robert Morris. Fairleigh Dickinson covered against Jacksonville yesterday on a half-court shot at the buzzer, so if you had Jacksonville yesterday, I really do feel for you, but with Robert Morris, I do think that this team just has a little bit too much versatility for a Fairleigh Dickinson team that, they're a nice, crafty bunch. We all saw what they were able to do in the NCAA tournament a season ago, but I think that they're going to have a tough time going up against Marquise Hastings down low. He's been averaging a double-double this year with 10 rebounds, right in the neighborhood of about 14 points per contest, and has been letting it fly at a 46% clip from three-point range. I do think that that's going to taper off. He has never shot above 21% from three-point range, but for Fairleigh Dickinson, you're going to be looking at someone like Sean Moore to be able to step up down low. He's been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game, but at 6 of 5, I do think that he's a little bit outgunned. Fairleigh Dickinson, they're shooting well from three-point range once again. Going into yesterday, shooting about 36% from three-point range. Ansley Almoner, he has been tremendous, putting in their 17-plus points per contest. At 6 foot 7, he's able to shoot in the high 30s from three-point range, but it is going to be a little bit of a difficult task going up against the Robert Morris team that recognized that the record is not necessarily too terrific, but they've been close in quite a few games. Justice Williams, I think, is someone that can take over a game. He missed a game or two to begin the season, but 14.5 points, 2.5 assists, a former top 200 recruit. I think that he's going to be able to elevate these guys around him, like a Stephon Walker who's been able to give you 6 boards per contest. You've had TJ Wainwright be a designated three-point shooter at 44% from the outside, and the biggest thing for Robert Morris, cutting down on the turnovers. They've been turning the ball over right around 15 times per contest this far this season. Fairleigh Dickinson, they do a solid job of being able to generate right around 10 or so steals per game, but they too have been turning the ball over right around 13 times per contest as well. So I do think that things get a little bit ugly, and I do think that Robert Morris is going to be able to win from within, and Robert Morris does like to be able to play a bit more of a slower style, and I do think that they're going to get that in this spot with both of these teams playing a lot of basketball the last 72 or so hours. So semi-total 147, diving in on the under, and we'll lay up to 6.5 with Robert Morris. 3 at 6.585, 3 at 6.586. Coastal Carolina is playing us to NC Central. NC Central is between a 4 to a 4.5 point underdog, and your total is between 143.5 and 145.5. And with NC Central, I did set them as an underdog of 6 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay it with Coastal Carolina. Coastal Carolina did not necessarily look the best in the Myrtle Beach Invitational, but they were playing against some very good competition. And for NC Central, they just didn't bring in the transfers like you'd expect. They lose darn near their entire backcourt from the season ago, so it does mean that they're trying to mix and match with someone like a Pooh Boy King, who's been able to give you 15.5 points per game. He's really had to become the main go-to scorer for the team. And to the credit of NC Central, they're not turning the ball over a ton. They're only turning it over 11.5 times per game. They just don't have the shooting that they had last year when you had someone like a Jordan Wright be able to shoot it well from three-point range. You've had Fred Cleveland be able to give you 14 points, 4.5 assists, but he's not necessarily that elevator that you saw a season ago. And then losing Brendan Medley-Bacon down low was big, as now they're looking at Emmanuel Izabooner to be able to give you 6 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Coastal Carolina, the George Mason transfer and Janika Ojiako has been able to give you about 8.5 rebounds per game. I think that he wins the battle down low and been able to get a lot out of Kylan Blackman. There's a lot of Blackmans in college basketball right now. It's just a big, giant family tree of these guys that all just play the guard spot tremendously. But career 37% three-point shooter. He's done a great job with 14 points per game. But Coastal Carolina's holds, shooting 36.5% per three. They need to clean up the fact that they are shooting 58% at the free throw line. They don't have a single guy averaging north of 7 points per game, shooting above 70% at the charity stripe. I do think think that that'll be coming with time, but I do think that Kevin Easley is going to be easily the most versatile player out there on the floor. 14 points, 7 boards, 3 assists, able to pop it from 3-point range. Began his career over at TCU along with Chattanooga, and I like his overall game, and I do think that that'll lead to Coastal Carolina being able to get it done against a new-look NC Central team. I did set my total at a 148. NC Central looking to play a little bit more up-tempo, and I do think that they're going to be a touch out of sorts. Coastal Carolina, they are really gunning it, as this team has given up at least 80 points in every one of their games thus far this season. So looking at the over and willing to lay up to 5.5 with Coastal Carolina. 306-587, 306-588. Texas A&M Commerce is playing host to Denver. Denver is a 2 to a 3-point underdog, and your totals between 154.5 and 157. And with Denver, I did set them as a 1-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. Now with Denver, the name of the game for them has really never been defense, and I don't think it ever will be. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, this bunch is clocking in number 320, but it's not like Texas A&M Commerce is doing an amazing job either at 259th. And for Denver, you do have those guys that are able to elevate, and they're able to give you some just tremendous scoring, as Denver is right now being led by the 24.5 points per game that you've been able to get out of Tommy Bruner, shooting north of 50% from 3, which that'll tail off. He's a career more like 33-34% three-point shooter. But for Texas A&M Commerce, they do have a lot of versatile pieces, and they've got some depth. They don't necessarily have that one go-to guy, though, and they're not really strong down low. Been able to get about 10.5 points, 5.5 boards out of Tommy Lewis, but this team really has no size whatsoever. They're shooting 30% from 3-point range, 42% overall from the floor. There's just really not a lot to love for this team. You've got Jerome Brewer, who's been able to give you 13 points per game, but for Denver, they should be able to win that battle down low with the Pac-12 transfer to Tanamo, being able to generate about 9.5 rebounds and darn near 20 points per game as well. At 6'9", he is shooting 40% from 3, and Denver as a whole, shooting 37.5% from the outside with under 9 turnovers per game. Highly efficient on the offensive side of things. You've got a Commerce team that's had a rough time being able to get it going on offense. Commerce is looking to play a little bit more slow and controlled in. It's not like Denver is really like pushing tempo and absolutely ripping it down your throat. I do think that Denver should see a little bit of regression in terms of their scoring, but even with that regression, I do believe that they're a better team than Commerce because they're going to be able to win from within. So I did set my total at 149. I'm diving in on the under, but with Denver, made them the 1-point favorite. I'm going to be riding with them outright on the money line. 306-589, 306-590. It is Quinnipiac, and they're going to be playing us at Stone Hill. Stone Hill is an underdog of 12 to 12.5 points, and your totals between 153.5 and 154.5. And with Stone Hill, I did set them as an underdog of 12.5 points. So at the 12 and not half a point more, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Quinnipiac. It is a Stone Hill bunch that is still trying to find their way at the Division I level. They came up from the non-D1 ranks, and they had a lot of guys that were in their 4/5th year a season ago, and now that's left really Max Zagorowski out there on an island. He's been doing a solid job being able to give about 11.5 points at 6'8", shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and then you've been able to get some good production out of Tony Felder as well. He comes in for VMI, solid contributor over at VMI a season ago with 10.5 points, shot in the neighborhood about 34% from 3-point range, but you just see more down low. You don't have a single guy for Stone Hill that is giving you more than 4.2 rebounds per game, and it's not like Quinnipiac is necessarily batting down the hatches with their rebounding, but you do have a trio of guys, and Paul Otinho, Matt Blanic, Amari Tice, all three of your top scorers for the team, logging at least 4.2 rebounds per game. As a matter of fact, of your top 6 scorers, 5 of them are giving you at least 4.2 rebounds per game, including Richie Springs, who comes in from UConn, 7 points, 5 boards. He's able to protect the rim down low. Quinnipiac as a whole, shooting 36.5% from 3. Now, we have seen Quinnipiac take a dive with regards to their defense. They were a top 100 team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis a season ago. They're now more in the neighborhood about 247th, but not like Stone Hill has been some sort of an amazing defense either, as they are currently 346th in this category, and I do think that Quinnipiac going to take it to a Stone Hill team that's looking to play a little bit more slow and controlled. I do think that the Quinnipiac defense is going to be able to pick it up just as Skoge as well, and then for Quinnipiac, Savion Lewis giving you 8.5 assists per contest. If that's not leading all of college basketball, it's pretty darn close to being able to do so. So with Quinnipiac, going to be willing to lay up to 12 with them. I think that they win from within. And with regards to the total, I do think that we see things taper off just a little bit. And I do think that the Quinnipiac defense takes hold. Looking at the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay the number. 306-591, 306-592. It is Longwood. They play us to Bethune-Cookman. Bethune-Cookman is an underdog of 12.5 to 13.5 points. Your totals between 142 and 142.5. Set my line at 13. Personally, between a 12.5 12.5 and a 13.5. I would rather take 13.5 rather than lay 12.5 because I do think that Bethune-Cookman has some upside. They've got a guy in Zion Harmon who's a former top 150 recruit that is able to give you north of 15 points per contest. Now, Bethune-Cookman needs to improve on the fact that they are 280th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they do a good job of being able to generate some steals as well. And this is a Longwood team that they're interesting in the backcourt because they've got a sure-handed guy in Waylon Apper that does not turn the ball over a whole heck of a lot, but at the same time, he really doesn't elevate in terms of a scoring perspective. He's looking to get other guys involved, and this is a Longwood team that they're not a good three-point shooting team. Now, Longwood, I believe, is a better three-point shooting team than the 26.5% that they had going into the day on Saturday, but you're also going to be relying a lot on low post play for this team. You've got Michael Christmas, who is back, and it is Christmas time. He's been able to give the team 7.5 boards per contest. Simon Zappala has been a 7-footer that has come in from Utah State, and he's been able to give you about 9 to 10 points per game. He's able to give you free rebounds as well, but who's really going to be that creator on the outside that helps out? You've had Jonathan Massey come in from McNeese, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range with right around 12 points per contest, but now you also have Derek Carter-Hollinger back at the fold for Bethune-Cookman as well. Missed the beginning part of the season when I was at Montana a few seasons ago as a combo player, was able to shoot 44% from three with right around 7 points per contest, and helping on Zion Harmon in the backcourt. Jacoby Heedy, he as a sophomore has been able to do a tremendous job of upping his game, shooting in the mid-30s from three-point range, logging nearly 16 points, 5 boards per game. Bethune-Cookman looking to be quite a bit more up-tempo. We've got a Longwood team that's looking to keep things a little bit more low and slow. I do think that we're going to be able to have this game go a little bit more up-tempo, and I do think that Longwood going to be seeing some positive variance with their shooting, and hey, for Longwood, they themselves 80-plus points in 4 out of their last 5 games, so going to be looking at the over and 13.5 or more with Bethune-Cookman. 306-593, 306-594. Central Arkansas is going to be playing us in New Orleans. New Orleans is a favorite of 4 points, and your total is 153, and with New Orleans, I did set them as a 2.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Central Arkansas. Got a pair of teams that just throughout the history of college basketball since they were first listed on the betting board during the 2018-19 season, these have been 2 creme de la creme teams of being able to go over the total as they never play any defense, and you've got for New Orleans by far the best player in this game in Jordan Johnson. Jordan Johnson is currently putting up about 22.5 points per game. Last year shot 48% from 3. This year, that's more in the neighborhood about 40% from 3-point range, but he certainly is an elevator with that regard. And for Central Arkansas, they have to deal with Cameron Hunter, their top scorer, being out of the fold, but you've got Elias Cato, who's been able to do a very good job of filling the void for Elias Cato. He's been able to do just a little bit of everything with 13 points, 6 boards, a block and a half, a steal and a half per game, all while shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range at 6'9". He's become essentially a point forward for this team. You're going to need to be able to win this battle down the line. I do think that they're going to be able to do so, as Ogambasi Etam has been able to give you about 8.5 to 9 rebounds per game, and then you got just a real lack of size for this New Orleans team. You don't have a single guy on this New Orleans roster that's been able to give you north of about 6.5 rebounds per game. I do like the way that you've been able to get a little bit more out of Jamon Vincent. He's been able to give you 8.5 points, 6.5 rebounds, was a part-time starter a season ago that was a very good situational player. Meanwhile, for New Orleans, it is a bunch that has just not gotten what they were hoping for out of James Glisson III. I remember over at Mercer, he was a double-figure scorer over the last few seasons during the 2021-22 season, had last season marred by injury, and it just appears as though there's something holding him back right now. It's a New Orleans team that, despite Johnson shooting it so well from 3, they're shooting below 30% as a collective. They have been able to generate about 10 steals per game, so that's a little bit of an issue for Central Arkansas. So I do think that this is going to be sort of a make it and take it sort of game. I think that New Orleans is going to be gambling for turnovers. I think that they come up with some, but I think that with Central Arkansas, what they do down low, it's going to keep them in this game. I set my total at a 162.5. I'm looking at the over, and with Central Arkansas, 3 or more going to be willing to take the points with them. 306-595, 306-596. Jacksonville State and Incarnate Word do battle from the campus of UT San Antonio. You've got Jacksonville State, a 5.5 to a 7.5 point favorite. 139.5 to 140 is your total line. I said Jacksonville State is a 5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Incarnate Word. With Incarnate Word, this team is still a little bit of a work in progress, but Sky Wicks logging north of 20 points and 9 rebounds per game. This guy has come on and has become an absolutely tremendous player. Meanwhile, you've got a Jacksonville State team that they just appear to be a little bit rudderless right now. They brought in Kai Tandy from Xavier, and he's been able to do some good work. He's logging 15 points per game, and you have a little bit more depth in terms of your low post play for Jacksonville State. You've had Jawan Purdue along with Marcellus Brigham Jr. both give you about 6 rebounds per game, but it's a Jacksonville State team that typically is solid from three-point range, and they have turnovers to go along with that good three-point shooting. Well, the turnovers are there. They're turning the ball over 14 times per game, but they're only shooting about 31% from three-point range, and this is a Jacksonville State team that typically is inconsistent with their defense. Right now, they're right around 100th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. I do attribute that a lot to the fact that they have played in their last 3 games North Alabama, Incarnate Word, so this is a rematch, and UTSA meet for the Roadrunners. And the last time these two teams played, this was on the campus of Incarnate Word. Incarnate Word actually pulled that game out 67-66, so it is a big-time revenge spot here for Jacksonville State, but I'm not sure how you can take a look at this game that Incarnate Word won on their home floor by 1, and now think on a neutral court that Jacksonville State should be this big of a favorite, especially the 7.5 line, as Incarnate Word has been able to do a halfway decent job of being able to get some production off the bench in that game. Devontae Dennis, he was able to go 4 of 4 from the floor overall for Dennis this season. Has been able to log in the neighborhood about 6 points, 3 boards. You just have a little bit more depth in general with this Incarnate Word team than you've had in past seasons, especially with bringing over Sean Robinson, who he comes over from Austin Peay, and in the win that they had about a week or so ago against Jacksonville State, he had just 7 points in that game, and he's a double-figure scorer. So I do think that this line is out of whack. I think that Jacksonville State gets their revenge, but I do think that this is going to be another close game. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Incarnate Word. Did set my total at a 139 as well. Got a pair of teams that are a little bit sloppy with the ball. They're going to turn the ball over quite a bit, so going to be taking a look at the under to go along with these points. 306, 597, 306, 598. Western Carolina is going to be playing us in North Alabama. North Alabama, a 7.5 to an 8-point underdog, and your totals between 146.5 and 147, and with North Alabama, set them as a 9-point underdog. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Western Carolina. Western Carolina does lose a few pieces from a season ago, like Deshaun Claw, but I love the way that this team has been able to reload. They've already got a nice win on their ledger, going on the road and knocking off Notre Dame. Granted, a very down Notre Dame team, but hey, you'll take it if you can get it in. They've got the best player on the floor in Vatarius Woolbright. Vatarius Woolbright is doing it all. 19 points, 9.5 boards, 5.5 assists per game. He's doing everything except for shoot threes. His career about 25% three-point shooter, but he's tough of the stat sheet in all aspects. Now, Damian Forrest is going to be a load for North Alabama that is going to be tough for Western Carolina to match up with. He's logging 8.5 points, 8.5 boards per game. And for North Alabama, they are shooting about 37.5% from 3. It's coming at a cost, though. They are turning the ball over about 15.5 times per game. KJ Johnson has done a nice job with 18.5 points per game, but typically he's the main facilitator for this team. He's been playing much more off the ball, as you've had Jakari Lane actually be the guy dishing it out with right around 3.5 assists per game with Jakari Lane. He last season was a mid-33-point shooter, and he's been maintaining that thus far this season, but without having some of the guys from the season ago, especially Daniel Ortiz, I do think that's going to be a little bit tough for North Alabama. Credit where credit is due for North Alabama. They're actually currently a top 115 team in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. That's due to the fact that they have played some very, very rough competition. And for Western Carolina, the backcourt still has Trey Jackson, who was able to log 15-plus points per contest. Russell Jones, coming off of a year where he had 9 points per game, shot in the mid-30s from three-point range, and he's currently shooting north of 50% from 3. Should see a little bit of a fall off there, but Western Carolina only turning the ball over 8.5 times per game. They're a bit more disciplined than North Alabama, and I do think that that is going to be the difference in this one, and a big reason why I did set my line at 9. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Western Carolina. Did set my total at 145. I do think that the scoring for these two teams is going to slow down a little bit, as I think that both of these teams are going to experience a bit of a drop-off with regards to their three-point shooting. So, going to be diving in on the under, and I'm willing to lay it with Western Carolina. 306, 599, 306, 600. Central Florida plays host to Stetson. Stetson is an 11 to an 11.5 point underdog, and your totals between 139 and 140. And with Stetson, I did set them as an underdog of 13 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay it with Central Florida. Love the way that Jalen Sellers has come in for the Central Florida team. He's been shooting just below 50% from three-point range, has been able to put in there just some big-time points with 20 points per contest, and works really well with Darius Johnson, who he needs to cut down on the turnovers. 4 turnovers per game, that's not like him. Last 2 seasons, he averaged 2 and 2.4 per contest, while averaging about 3.5 assists per game. He's never been a great three-point shooter, but does a good job of being able to rip the ball away as well. 2-point steals per contest last season, 2.2 steals per game thus far this year. Going up against the Stetson team that they are always very methodical, slow, but very efficient on offense, shooting 36.5% from three this season. That's down a little bit from a season ago. Biggest reason why you lose Wiesa Ponzo from a year ago. But I do like the addition of Alec Oglesby, someone who began his career at Cleveland State, most recently was at UNC Wilmington, and this season he's been able to take off for sets in career, about 39% three-point shooter, shooting about 45% from three as a 6'5", nice wing player. You got Stephon Swenson, who last year had 5 assists per game. He's up to 7 assists per contest this season, but he does need to cut down on the 4 turnovers game, and you'll notice teams that they shoot it well from three, they really do specialize in three-point shooting. Oftentimes they will have a few more turnovers trying to get those good shots. You've got Jalen Blackman, who's been a reliable scorer at 18 points per contest, shooting north of 40% from three-point range, but I do think that they're running into a Central Florida team that is just unlike any defense that they have really seen to this point. Central Florida, they're a rock-solid team that a season ago was in the top 50 in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis with this UCF team. I think that they are very much going to be able to continue to do that, as currently they're right around 51st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. But if you parse it out and just look at their home games, this team has been one of the best home defenses in all of college basketball, allowing 71.7 points per 100 possessions. I think that Stetson is going to have a little bit of a tough time shooting on the road, and that allows Central Florida to be able to get it done and get a little bit more of their tempo and style. Semi-total 135, going to be looking at the under and going to be willing to lay up to 12.5 with Central Florida. 36601, 36602. Dowson is playing against Morgan State. Morgan State a 13.5 to a 14.5 point underdog, and your total, that is anywhere between 140 and 141.5. I made Morgan State just a 7.5 point underdog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. I'm just very off put by this Towson team in general. They are playing a very slow style, one of the slowest in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, Morgan State, each of the last 3 years, they've been a top 25 team in terms of total possessions per game. So you're going to have a tempo war going on. But with this Towson bunch, you just take a look at the backcourt, and it's not what it has been in past years. As a matter of fact, your main facilitator, that's a true freshman in Dylan Williamson. He's been able to come in and he's been able to give you right around 3 assists per contest, but he's not necessarily a scorer. For Towson, they're shooting 30% from 3, 63% at the free throw line. Despite playing really slow, they're turning it over 13 times per game, and really other than Charles Thompson, who's been able to give you 8 rebounds per game, you don't necessarily have rock-solid guys on the glass. And with Morgan State, while they haven't necessarily been able to put it all together quite yet, they've got weapons. Winston Tabbs, when he was at the ACC level for Boston College a few years ago, he was averaging right around 13 points per game. The only reason why he never really panned out was due to injury. He's right now logging about 15.5 points, 4 boards. He has been tremendous. Got a 6'7" combo player that 2 years ago over at St. Francis of Pennsylvania shot 40% from 3, 11 points per contest, and Miles Thompson was robbed last season due to injuries. Now, you're not going to have anyone down low that is going to give you like 8+ rebounds per game or anything like that, but you bring back Cameron Hobbs from a season ago. He is shooting 45% from 3, 10 points, 2.5 assists per game. This is a team that's going to facilitate by committee, and if you're able to get just a little bit more out of some of your forwards, like a Christian Oliver, who's 7 feet tall, a little bit more of a project player that's able to give you 5 rebounds per game, you're really staring at something, and that's really the only advantage that Towson has. It's down low. This Morgan State team has a lot of firepower out there in the backcourt. They've been getting better and better as the season went along. Against BYU, they got absolutely dump trucked in that game. Ever since then, respectable effort against Radford. They lose by 1 against Chicago State. Meanwhile, you've got a Towson bunch that's just stuck in the mud, scoring 66 points or fewer in each of their last 4 games, and they have not scored north of 70 points in any game this year. Very hard to be able to cover that sort of a number when you're not getting to 70. Now, I did set my total at 143.5. I do think that Morgan State still very shotty with their defense, to say the least. Against D1 competition, they have given up 80+ points in, I believe, every one of their games as far as this season, but I think that they hold in there against Towson. We'll take the double figures with Morgan State and going to be taking a look at the over. 306.603, 306.604. Siena is going to be playing us to Albany. Albany is a favorite of 2 to 1.5 points, and your total is between 141 and 142. With Albany, set them as a 2-point favorite. The 1.5 is the absolute max I'm willing to lay with them, but I'm willing to lay it. I do think that Albany should be the favorite in this ordeal, just because with Albany, you've got just a little bit more camaraderie with this team, because with Siena, with Michael Ealy out of the fold, this team just looks completely disjointed. You have not been able to get anything whatsoever out of many of your guys that have come in via the transfer portal, like Giovanni Emma Giroux, he comes over from Sam Houston State, where he was a complete afterthought last season, and right now he's giving the team 11.5 points, 4.8 rebounds per game, and he's leading the team in many aspects. Not only do you have Ely out the fold, but Zach Tekken, he has missed the last few games for his team as well, and he was their main facilitator from a Siena team that they were very much banking on guys that were lesser known, that were in the system, taking strides forward, and that just has not happened. 18 turnovers per game for the Siena team, and while Albany is not a team that necessarily specializes in steals, they only get right around 5 per contest. They do a better job of taking care of the ball. You do bring in Sebastian Thomas. He was a part-time starter at Rhode Island a season ago. He and Amari Marshall, the gentleman from Hofstra, been able to combine for 32 points, 6 assists. They're pretty much doing a good job of running the show by committee. You also bring in the former Binghamton standout, Tyler Bertram. He was able to log 10 plus points per contest a few seasons ago when he was in the America East, and then went to UAB, was unable to find his footing there, but it's a welcome back situation for him as well. And I do think that this team should be able to win the battle down low with Jonathan Beagle, 6'10" big man who's been able to log about 8 rebounds per game. He's been able to get better and better as the season has won along, 7 plus boards in each of the team's last 4 games. Not really going to be a shot eraser or anything like that, but does a good job cleaning up the mess. And for Albany, I do think that they're going to do a nice job against a Siena team that's just all over the place with their offense, and I just can't rely upon Siena doing their part with this total. Siena has not broken the 60-point plateau since Ely has gone out of the fold. Recognize that Albany is playing a little bit faster, but then you're going to look at the under here. Set my total at 136, and with Albany, 1 to lay up to 2 with them. 306, 605, 306, 606. West Virginia is going to be playing against a Bellarmine. Bellarmine is an underdog of 10 points, seeing a straight 9.5 out there as well. 131 to 132.5 is your total. And with West Virginia, I did set them as a 10-point favorite. Seeing the 9.5 out there, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Bellarmine. They do lose a few critical pieces from a season ago. Justin Betts was able to give you like 10 points, 5 boards, a few assists. He was a nice, versatile big man for this team, and for West Virginia, certainly has been less than savory for them, to say the least, but I do think that them hanging in there against Virginia is a good little wake-up call for them. You still have Jesse Edwards, who's able to log a double-double, and he's going to be able to completely manhandle this game down low, and they are still going up against a squad that is completely outgunned in terms of just being able to match up physically with this team. You've got Ben Johnson, who's able to give you 14 points per contest, and for Bellarmine, typically this is a solid 3-point shooting team, and right now they're shooting 35.5% from 3-point range, and it's just a specialty of Bellarmine. They always play super slow, they're pretty efficient on offense, and they're really, really bad on defense, and we've been seeing that once again. Bellarmine, they're 288th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, which for them is actually a little bit fast, and for Bellarmine, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 299. So, yep, this is very much what you'd expect there. West Virginia, they're only right around about 100th with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, but I do think that they match up well with guys like Alec Ferrum along with Bash Weiland, who've been able to combine for about 18 points per game. They're able to shoot it relatively okay from 3-point range, but for West Virginia, they also do have someone that was one of the leaders in assist-to-turnover ratio from a season ago in Seth Wilson. He's been able to log about 8 points, 3.5 boards, shooting 40% from 3-point range, and I think he's going to be able to do enough in the backcourt to lead West Virginia to victory as they play another game without Kirk Reese and the emergence of Quinn Selzniski, averaging 16.5 points, shooting north of 40% from 3, also has been massive for West Virginia. Set my total at 134. I do think that this is going to continue to be a West Virginia team that plays relatively slowly without Kirk Reese, but with Bellarmine giving up all sorts of open looks, I do like this total over and want to lay up to 9.5 with West Virginia. 306, 607, 306, 608. Pacific plays hosts of Mississippi Valley State. Mississippi Valley State, a 21 to 21.5 point underdog. 138 to 138.5 is your total, and for our good friends Mississippi Valley State, I set them as a 15.5 point underdog. It has been a bad year for Mississippi Valley State, and they are once again doing everything that they can to reclaim the throne of worst team in all of college basketball. That said, this Pacific team should not be laying 21 points to anyone in Division I college basketball at this point. And I mean, for this Mississippi Valley State team, if you've got one good thing that's going for them, Raekwon Brown has been a very good player for them, and I'm trying to be as nice as I can, but I mean, he's putting in there 15 points, 4.5 boards, not a great 3-point shooter, and boy, does he need some help, but I mean, he's been able to do a relatively solid job. You have no rebounding on either side. Brown is right now Mississippi Valley State's top rebounder. Pacific has one guy averaging north of 4 rebounds per game. That'd be Donovan Williams. He's been solid, 11.5 points, 5.5 boards, and this is a Pacific team that is very much based around 3-point shooting, and they're shooting about 31% from three. Not great. 14.5 turnovers per game as well. Judson Martindale, the transfer from Holy Cross, he's been able to pick it up a lot more recently, shooting about 35% from three. 12.5 points per contest after a slow start to the season. 13 plus points in 4 of the team's last 5 games, but you just don't have anything down low. Luson Holmes, and he was at the MEAC level last year where he was a solid scorer over at South Carolina State. He's one of their main guys, and he's currently shooting 10% from three-point range. Tyler Beard, probably going to be the best point guard in this game. He's able to do all 3 assists per contest for Pacific, but they don't even have that going for them. And for Mississippi Valley State, you're finding a little bit of a Robin for Raekwon Brown and Donovan Sanders. He's been able to do a solid job, giving the team right around 9 points per contest. I do think that if he can elevate, that'll be able to give the team just a little bit more. And you've had some production as well out of Areco Gibson. Gibson, a season ago, was able to see 14 starts because he was dealing with a little bit of injuries. He's been able to give you about 7 points per game at 6'7", has a little bit of versatility. This Mississippi Valley State team sucks, but Pacific should not be laying 21 in this spot. It is a total that I set at 133.5. Pacific is struggling with their 3-point shooting. Mississippi Valley State is struggling at basketball, so we're going to be taking a look at the under with Mississippi Valley State having scored 53 points or fewer in all but one of their games this far this season. So diving in on the under and going to be willing to take the points with the Delta Devils. And we wrap things up with 3 of 6-6-09 through a 6-6-10. Florida International is going to be playing us to Kennesaw State. Go Owls, as Kennesaw State is a 3.5 point underdog. Total on this game is varying between 158 and 158.5. Set FIU as a 3-point favorite. So catching 3.5 here, I'm going to be taking a look at those points with Kennesaw State. If there is one critical number in college basketball, I do think that it is 3, just because that is a very sticky spot as to late game fouling. Do you not foul late in games? Things like that. So I actually do view that of significance. But take a look at this Kennesaw State team, and you've got a lot of guys back from a season ago. Now, you do lose your coach in Abdul Rahim, and he did take 3 of the better players with him, but Devin Robinson, he's back after he last season was able to log about 6 boards, 11 points per game, and he's elevated to right around 12 points, 9.5 rebounds. Tyrell Burden is your main facilitator from a season ago, chipping in there a steal and a half, 4.5 boards, 5 assists. Now, you do need Kennesaw State to shoot it better from 3-point range, and they did lose a lot of shooting from a season ago when they were shooting about 37% from distance. They're currently shooting less than 30% thus far this season, but been able to get some really nice production of Simeon Kodal. Kodal comes in after last season. He was an afterthought for the team with about 4 points per contest. This year he's logging 15.5 points per game. Been shooting about 33% from 3-point range, chipping in there some assists. Kennesaw State doesn't necessarily have ideal size, but this matchup is very good for them as FIU doesn't have a single guy that's able to give you north of 5 rebounds per game. Jonathan Ibar, who comes in from North Florida, is the only guy that's able to give you north of 4.1 rebounds per game, and you've got size with this FIU team. Seth Pinckney is just a lazy 7'1" guy that doesn't give you any rebounds. He's giving you like a block per game. He has never materialized. You need to have Mohamed Sanogo try to channel his inner Adama Sanogo, who makes things a go-go, as he's giving the team 6 points, 4 boards. He's just not really giving you a whole heck of a lot. I like Arterio Dean out there in the backcourt. He's able to generate about 3.5 steals per game, and you get about 2.3 per contest out of Sean Giddens as well. These 2 guys have been great, combining for about 25 points per game, and Dean is currently shooting 45.5% from 3, but he's really the only guy bombing it from 3, as a collective FIU only shooting in the neighborhood about 30% from 3. When you're shooting 30% from 3 and you don't have a lot of size, makes it very difficult to be able to get wins. That's why FIU only has 1 of them thus far this season. So I do think that Kennesaw State is going to be able to hold in there. Can't quite take them outright on the money line, but going to be willing to take the 3. I do think that this is going to be a game that's cranked up a little bit more up tempo, but we have seen FIU held to 71 or fewer in each of their last 3 games as well. So I think that this total is just a little bit high. As FIU playing a touch slower than a season ago. Set by total 155, diving in on the under, and going to be willing to take the points with Kennesaw State. And that wraps things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the Visa Family Podcast. If you do like sharing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to fire those in. First one is by Twitter/X timeline at unit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM. Maybe does not matter, size per usual. Please do send these into the timeline. The other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season and into the off season on this podcast, which means I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.